Hey guys. This is part 6 of What If Naruto has Byakugan and Emotionless. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 41, Contemplation. They found the Hokage cleaning her nails in the middle of a large rubble-strewn area that hadn't been so rubble-strewn before the battle. She was sitting on a large rock, and gently gave a sad sigh as she surveyed her hands. Shizen stood by her master, subtly attempting to check her for injuries as the older woman checked her nails. Would you look at that, Shizen? The younger woman sighed. What is wrong, Tsunade-sama? The bastard chipped one of my nails a little. Look, she looked. The chip was minute in size. Tsunade-sama, you just defeated an S-ranked missing nin from Suna. You're covered in blood and you're worried about your nails? Tsunade stared at her student, then they both burst out laughing. It wasn't just me that defeated him. The ANBU helped as well as Shikakunara. You'd have to be an idiot to attack Konoha when it is full of elite shinobi. What were our losses? Shizen checked the report the commander had written. Half a dozen ANBU, 17 Chunin, 5 genin and around 50 civilians. The majority of the casualties were caused by the bomber who was led away from the city. A further 100 or so people injured for critically. Fortunately, the hospital is coping with the injuries. Tsunade sighed, the elation of victory ebbing away at the casualty list. Return to the hospital and help out there. I have to find out what happened to that bomber. Then Naruto, Anko and teammate came into view, or it could find me. Anko, what the hell happened? Anko gestured to the body on Akamaru's back. That's the bomber. Darky-kun lead him into my forest and killed him. Tsunade put her head in her palms. Of course. Somehow he would get sucked into this. He was just defending Konoha. Why and how did you attack him? I recall him being on some sort of dragon in the air. I got his attention by shooting at him and decided to lead him away from the city. Then he followed and Anko-chan prevented him from killing me. After that, he attempted to escape and teammate assisted me in attempting to capture him. Tsunade eyed the body. Take it that failed? Indeed. Then Shino and Naruto looked at each other with the realization they had spoken at the same time. Kiba burst out laughing. Tsunade smiled. Too much to do now for a debrief. I need to be at the hospital. Teammate, take that body to Tianai, then you have the rest of the day off. Naruto, if you perform any more active duty without my permission, I will have you restrained to a hospital bed within moments. Write a mission report, then do something that doesn't involve you nearly dying. That was clear then. Tsunade set off to the hospital in a cloud of dust, a couple of ANBU rising behind her. Shino gave Naruto a brief nod and lead his team off with the body. That left only Naruto and Anko. Naruto subconsciously rubbed his shoulder and found it hurt more than usual. He hid the pain. He need to find out what it was. However, Anko had seen him rub his arm. Anything wrong with your arm, Darky-kun? No, she smiled. I've heard 1,000 guys say that. Let me see it. He couldn't escape, and shrugged back his cloak. Anko gently poked his shoulder, and a small spike of pain was caused. That looked swollen, in fact. She gave his arm a much less friendly jab. Naruto couldn't help but give a small twinge in his facial expression. She gave him a stern look. Did that guy break your shoulder, and you just carried on like nothing happened? He reflected. Certainly he had taken a hard shot there, and his arm had ached a bit during the mission. It was possible. It seems like a possibility. Anko sighed. I'm taking you to the hospital. Besides, you and I need to have a chat. If I try to escape, I break your other shoulder. Well, she had her persuasive ways. The inconvenience of 2 broken shoulders would be excessive, and the benefits of a well-patched shoulder would do him good. He let her half lead, half push him towards the hospital. She gave his cheek a little pat and giggled. It was a scary sound somehow. Oh, he's got cute blonde face hair. That does make you look a little bit older though, but it's too fluffy to be dignified. He gave his face a rub with his good arm. It was slightly fluffy. He would need to shave. Anyway, how did you poison the Uchiha in his base? He felt they were. Fortunately, nobody had heard that. From what he had surmised, the Uchiha had been popular for his clan's status. A 10-part poison. Had to get him to form a catalyst that was absorbed into the walls of his small intestine, which took 3 parts. Then I tested with a small amount of uncooked meat. Then I needed to get another to absorb. Then I just needed to feed him the right balance of foods. I infiltrated the kitchens when I could. She nodded. Well, that outdoes anything I've ever done. Nice job. Then again, 10 parts. Presumably needed to be that circuitous to get around medical checks by his medical staff. How was it in there? He shivered as his side burnt a little more. He put a hand to it. The pain was definitely the wrong side of uncomfortable. Anko noticed this too. Your side too? He really did a number on you. Naruto nodded. It was true. He could feel a number of bruises on parts of his body, and the fact he had coughed blood meant that he had some internal bleeding. But was it hard? Lonely? It must have been tense in there. I completed my mission. I did what needed to be done. He knew the instant the words left his mouth that it wouldn't sound like him. He had turned away too. All the little things he never needed to worry about, his instincts to hide himself socially and never to trust too deeply had been eroded by years alone. He realized he craved conversation more than ever. It was not his place. He needed someone to talk to. He needed counsel. He realized that Tsunade had been right all along. She had known. Anko patted him on his good shoulder as they approached the hospital. Talk to me if you need to, okay? Now I need to find a dango shop. Victory meal! She punched the air, did the weird blowing gesture at him and galloped off into Konoha, scattering people in her wake. Naruto looked up at the building in front of him and found himself needing to breath. He had to do what had to be done. He sighed and pushed open the hospital door. A few minutes later he found himself in a treatment room. Apparently shinobi injuries went to a different area of the hospital to civilian ones. He pondered why as he waited for his doctor to arrive. Certainly shinobi injuries were likely to be more dangerous and horrifying than civilian ones. Nobody got stabbed by katanas or hit by large-scale jutsu when they were civilians. They only had to deal with broken bones and the occasional criminal injury. He considered the shinobi themselves. Were they unwilling to face treatment before civilians? Possibly an issue of pride. He could conceive of a strong ninja unwilling to show weakness before others because he did not want to appear weak. His motivation for hiding injuries was different. Was chakra an issue? Whilst all living things degenerate some chakra, was the larger quantities possessed by shinobi more important than he thought? His knowledge of medical techniques was minimal after all. It might well have been an issue of morale. After all, the shinobi were the face of the village, an example of the people protecting the villagers. At least the visible ones were. Root and Anbu hid because what they did was more dangerous and darker. If they saw their finest warrior bleeding they might get worried. A civilian uprising meant doom for any hidden village. His musing was interrupted by his doctor entering the room. It was Shizen, who smiled when she saw him. Ah, Naruto. Tsunade-sama said you'd got into a bit of bother fighting an S-rank nin. Anyone else I would call an idiot. Actually I would too. Now, what injuries are you aware of whilst I skin you? Take off your shirt. He did so, and realized that it was covered in small tears. Her hand, glowing a bluish-green, traveled over his upper body, and she gently sked at various things. Broken shoulder, bruises, internal bleeding that might have stopped. Shizen stopped her scan. Are you immune to pain? As in, do you actually feel pain? Yes. It is unpleasant, but overly focusing on it isn't an advantage in battle. She nodded. Okay, can rule out that disorder then. Yes, you can ignore it, but there is a limit. Do you know the extent of your injuries right now? No, you do not. Let me list it for you. Multiple cuts along your back, looks like tree bark rub. That was a possibility. He was faintly aware of hitting a tree at some stage. Broken shoulder and fractured fibula on your left arm, which probably means you didn't notice whilst using your crossbow. That was true. Your chest is more black and blue than pale skin. He looked. It appeared that it was. The fist imprints were very obvious. Apparently the man he had been fighting was proficient at taijutsu and quite strong. Be thankful he wasn't aiming for your face with his attacks. He probably wanted you to be able to talk afterwards. She was very logical. He found himself appreciating this more and more as she spoke in matter-of-fact sort of way. You have a punctured lung. That was unexpected. Fortunately it's a small puncture and the bone fragment from your slightly splintered breastbone is plugging it. It'll be tricky to extract. We'll need to operate. It'll also help us mend you more. Well, the fractured bones certainly explained the chest pain. Now, take off your pants and don't be shy. I need to skin your legs, and I want full resolution from this, so your pants have to come off. He took them off, leaving him in only his underwear. He wasn't too bothered by this. This was a medical situation and Shizen was a professional. She scanned his legs and thighs with care. Nothing here but a few scratches and, why am I not surprised, even more bruising. You can put the pants back on, and your shirt too. She turned away as he did, then scanned his head. That's odd. What is? You have a brain. I was expecting you to just be utterly stupid enough not to have one. He felt a touch insulted that she would make such a rookie mistake. You can tell I at least have a motor cortex and hippocampus. You have observed my memory and movement. It is therefore reasonably to assume the remainder of. Shut up and pay attention. You should not fight till you are in this condition. You realize what could have happened with that bone fragment in your lung. A slightly harder hit, and you would have died. Maybe a bit more running it could have got loose and gone into your brain. You reckless idiot. She brought out a syringe. You need an antibody shot to make sure nothing in your cuts was infectious. A precaution and nothing more. Then we can work on your physical injuries, then the mental ones. He accepted the injection with an outstretched arm. With that done, she disposed of the needle and pressed a button on a wall panel. Could I get a set of restraints for room 207? Restraints? She gave him a small smile. For you. Enforced bed rest. He tried to get up, his limbs felt a little heavier. He felt the drug taking effect. Did you inject me with a sedative? Yep. There was a knock at the door. She smiled at him as his vision blurred a little. Lie down and sleep, okay? Ah, here are my rest dry. The silence was quite sudden. With a last look, he saw Sakura in the doorway, staring at him with wide eyes. His interest in this new development suddenly ended when the drug shut down his systems and sent him into a dreamless sleep. Itachi moved quietly through the Akatsuki base. Not that there was a real need to, but he liked to keep himself to himself. He was deep in thought. Sasori and Deidara were dead, of that he had no doubt. Pain had sent the wrong people into Konoha. Deidara wasn't a thinker, and he wasn't an interrogation specialist. In fact, he was good at large-scale assaults and the like. Sending him to get information had been a foolish endeavor. Then again, Akatsuki was too skewed away from information gatherers. Only Zetsu truly excelled at it, but he couldn't capture an enemy. Sasori could have been useful, but it was likely that he could get overwhelmed by numbers. His poisons could only do so much against a city with the best medical teams in the elemental nations. He pondered all of it in his mind. What would his next move be? Certainly he had to play his hand carefully. Pain could not succeed, Akatsuki could not succeed. But Naruto had to pay with his life. He could not get his vengeance for the loss of all he held dear until Akatsuki had been stopped. He had to make sure. He felt the pain in his chest a little more acutely and stopped to breathe. His illness. How long did he really have? How much of a fight did he have left within him? He had been hoping he could go all out with Sasuke, but now. It was not worth reflecting on what might have been, only what he could now do. Certainly Naruto alone could not defeat the Akatsuki. He was too much of a subtle specialist to ever defeat an S-rank shinobi alone. No. Naruto would think his way around this problem. Itachi knew how hard it would be for him. Each member of Akatsuki was different and challenging, and the fact the pairs tended to cover one another's weaknesses was enough. Deidara was probably the weakest of the team. Sasori too was vulnerable alone. Who would go next? Certainly this was a setback for Akatsuki. S-rank missing and with suitable skills were hard to come by, especially ones who would want to join a group. Still, there was at least one he could think of who would join. His mind cast back to the fateful night he had slaughtered his own flesh and blood, the other figure in the mask that had helped him. He was certainly something different. Itachi could never confirm, but he suspected he had been behind the attack of the Nine Tails as well. That had been terrifying, even for him. No. That man was out there somewhere. He was dangerous too. It was when he would show up that was the question in Itachi's mind. He heard the footsteps behind him and sensed the figure coming. It was the leader, Itachi. Zetsu had returned from Konoha territory. Itachi didn't turn. I take it the news is not good. Deidara is dead, shot by a crossbow user. Sasori was crushed by the Hokage. Itachi nodded. Deidara did not explode the city? It appears he was distracted and enraged by the bow user, then lured into a forest. Itachi smiled. That told him a lot about Naruto. He was committed to his work, and would gladly die for a cause. That was certainly useful for him. Not only that, but he had been the one to finish Deidara. That was interesting too. We saw the battle. Zetsu rose from the floor next to the leader. Itachi quirked an eyebrow at the two-tone man. Zetsu was not normal, that much was for sure. The crossbow user very interesting, he is skilled yet not strong. He is somewhat like you, Itachi-kun. Yet we sensed another signature near him. So weak, so small, but possibly that of a tail beast. Itachi mentally cursed Naruto for his foolishness. Whilst he could not have sensed Zetsu in the heat of battle, why had he attacked? He knew that they were looking for him. Curse his dutiful nature to Konoha. Unto death it seemed. Surely that is wrong for a Jinchuriki. Would they not be more likely to be a force-based fighter with large chakra reserves? Zetsu never stopped smiling, at least on one half of his face. The other remained impassive. It is odd. We are unsure. He merits further observation. The leader finished the sentence for him. Zetsu will be around Konoha. If he leaves on a mission, then he will find out more about him. Until then, we focus on the remaining Jinchuriki. The Two Tails has been captured and is on its way in. Prepare for the sealing. Our newest member has arrived also. Itachi nodded. He hadn't expected any other outcome really. The zombie brothers were odd but frighteningly efficient. They had yet to fail a mission. That their target was captured now was expected. He knew he had to act sooner rather than later. Somehow he would bring down more members of his organization. He would have to find a way of getting the immortal ones killed. He grimaced as he concluded what he would have to do. He would make Akatsuki fight itself. Chapter 42, Bed Rest. Naruto slowly opened one eye from his bed. The mattress of the hospital bed wasn't as comfy as the one at home, but it was still better than the majority of alternatives he'd slept on. His heart monitor let out a constant beeping with his pulse. He sighed at the restraints. He could break them, but it would be a lengthy process. He could wait after all. A few minutes later, Shizen looked into the room and saw he was awake. She smiled. Ah, good morning, Naruto. How are you today? Or rather 2 days since we put you under. The sedative is only meant to last a few hours, but you just kept sleeping. To be honest, I'm not surprised. I'm a little restrained, Shizen-san. She let out a dry physician's laugh. Very good. Talon would have been proud of that one. Now, Tsunade-sama will be along to give you mission orders in a few minutes. Can I trust you not to run away until that has happened? He nodded. She undid the restraints, and he stretched his freed limbs. Then he pulled off the heart monitor patches to shut the monitor up. Shizen looked a little annoyed. Whilst not strictly necessary, I'd rather you didn't change that. It tends to freak people out when someone suddenly flatlines. Stay here until Tsunade-sama arrives. Hi. Shizen smiled and walked away. Naruto got the sense that there were some other figures on the other side of the door. He activated his Byakugan with interest. There was an ANBU on the other side of the door he didn't recognize. That was interesting. Why would he need protecting? His memory sorted through and brought up a possibility. Sakura. Ah. She had looked shocked when she had seen him, but she was one of the few who didn't know he had returned. How much did she know? Would she really attempt to kill him? Then again, who knew about him that wanted to kill him? He considered everyone in Konoha. Sakura? Niji, assuming the boy held a grudge and knew he had returned. Kurenai, but they had left on good terms, hadn't they? Hinata? The last name struck him as unlikely. Whilst she could fight, Hinata could have killed him when she had found him in an instant. Instead, she had brought him back to Konoha. He dismissed the matter as something he could consider afterwards and considered his priorities. If, as he suspected, he was to be banned from partaking additional missions, then he had to do something. He considered possibilities and needs. Near the top of the list was finding out what Baka's name had been, although nobody would tell him. It struck him as odd that the normally trivial bit of information was being withheld. Perhaps the mission records held the name. He recalled the fight with the man, and his lack of real options for damaging him. He needed to learn some new techniques to fight with. He looked at his bow and the small wire connected to the firing mechanism from the trigger. He recalled its purpose and knew what training he needed. He considered possibilities. He wondered what nature he was. He supposed the best for him would be a wind nature. The possibilities of powered bolts were certainly good. On the other hand, it left him weak against some natures, and he wasn't a natural at the wind style of fighting. Wind style generally involved unpredictability and innovation, which he admittedly could do. Yet it was too open, too free for him to use. He was a sudden striker, a one-shot kill. He needed more power, more streamlining. A way to make a crossbow shot unblockable or untraceable. Either worked with his style. More stealth too. The crossbow sometimes gave him away. He looked out of the window to see the sun rising. He'd had no idea of the time and now he knew. He felt a pang of guilt as he recalled Baka's words. He forced his analyzing mind to stop. It was hard. He had spent 3 years watching shadows, hiding from sound and making sure nobody knew he existed. He'd been constantly analyzing everything. He tried to switch off his brain and just take it in. He stared as he tried to process the information differently to normal. For a brief moment he saw as he had been able to before. He saw the red-pink of the sky slowly expanding into the vast blue expanse. He saw white clouds. Were they cumulo? No. It mattered not. The white and gray was stained with orange pinkness. It was the product of variable light diffraction caused by the physical being of their planet and world, and laws of nature that he only knew a little about. He sighed as his brain could not avoid analyzing it from a logical perspective. For once, he longed not to be as good as he was. Then his brain heard the footsteps outside his door and turned. He itched to take hold of a weapon but knew he didn't need it. It was a hospital. Nobody was trying to kill him. Well, unless someone had already and the ANBU was on guard duty. Tsunade entered the room. She smiled at the fact the lights were on and that he couldn't hide. It had to be good for him. He wasn't smiling, but that was normal. Naruto, Hokage-sama. She gestured for him to sit, and he did so. She pulled up a visitor's chair and cocked her head as she normally did when examining him. My ban on performing missions still stands. You are badly injured enough that you should not fight. Any additional healing effects from your condition aside. He assumed she meant the Nine Tails. His seals prevented most of its effects, but there was enough chakra to keep his healing accelerated. Aside from letting your injuries heal, I'm assigning you therapy as I said before. This will be performed by Hinata. That was a surprise. He didn't bother hiding it. Tsunade quirked an eyebrow. You expected someone else? He honestly had. Yes. Shizen-sen read my report first. She also is experienced in such matters. As such, she is better qualified to perform such a task. You are also more qualified, as are the majority of the doctors and medical staff. Tsunade smiled. But who do you trust more? He considered this. Shizen was by far the more experienced of the two, and certainly the more qualified. But Hinata was. He realized Hinata was one of the few people he could probably call a friend at this stage. More so than he could call Shizen a friend. Then he remembered the conversation with her, and the knowledge only they held. He had told her about his first real moment of panic like it was natural. Tsunade smiled as she watched him think. It had taken some time to get inside his head and think like him, but it was working. She knew who he could trust and who he called friend. She had to try and enforce that. Hinata. It seems illogical though. Good. Sessions are every Monday and Thursday afternoon. If you do not attend, then I will extend the mission ban. You will attend until the seal breaks. A bead of sweat formed on his forehead. His body tensed, and she saw him reach subconsciously for his burning side. She placed a firm hand on his shoulder and forced his eyes to look at hers. I know. I'm afraid of what it was as well. If it scares you, then it most likely scares everyone else as well. But you have to do this. This is an order. You know it is logical. He nodded. A single tear ran from his normal eye. I know, Hokage-sama. I am beginning to theorize that logic does not govern all decisions, nor can it be the correct choice in all situations. She smiled. It was true. If he ever discovered love, it would be funny to watch. Good. I look forward to you conquering this, and then we can work on problem number 2. Akatsuki? I assume you know what they are and what they are doing now. They look for the tailed beasts. That much I know. He didn't know why as well. Someone wanted to use them for a devastating jutsu. Naruto remembered Itachi's words, burned into his memory from the conversation they had shared. Tsunade nodded. That's only the half of it. It transpires they want to capture all the tailed beasts, and use them for a powerful jutsu. Jiraiya is off spying on them, and when he returns he'll have to examine you as well. It made sense. She understood and knew what was necessary. Yet she did it differently to his former master. Danzo would have used brainwashing to achieve success in his operatives. He searched for the difference between the two. May I ask a question, Hokage-sama? She nodded. Of course, Naruto. You may call me Tsunade if it makes you feel more comfortable. Hearing the sama just makes me feel old. Of course, Tsunade. Why do you care? She looked a little more shocked than he had anticipated. Then her face softened into a smile. Normally that's quite an insulting question, Naruto. I take it my way of dealing with you is different to that you have experienced before? It was true. En route, when I suffered a difficulty of challenge, I was set harder goals to achieve to bring myself through. When I told Danzo-sama of my issues on the mission where she nodded as he paused. I understand. Continue. Indeed. When I told him of the issues, he didn't react at all, and put me into isolation for a couple of days. It made sense to do so. I was not at optimal performance, and needed time to resolve such internal issues before continuing. I did so as expected and did not suffer difficulties on my missions until the invasion. Tsunade nodded. That was understandable. Danzo did not want emotion to form in Naruto. By having the young boy squash the emotion inside and hide it made sense. Well, made sense when thinking like someone running a hidden military wing. You have taken time out of your schedule to review my case specially, which doesn't make sense to me. You have greater priorities to attend to, yet you choose to care more. You bar me from missions but not as a punishment but as a benefit. It is a new viewpoint I have yet to fully comprehend, so culture shock effectively. He was used to relying on himself so often that other people showing him kindness came as a shock. She smiled. He was damaged and nearly broken but somehow still functioning. He had been alone for years and that meant he still didn't understand basic concepts a child understood, yet it was still there. Underneath it all, he was still a good person. There was hope. She realized she had done nothing but slightly smile at his confused face. He needed an answer. Well, it's my duty to care. Aside from being the Hokage and thus in charge of the well-being of all the shinobi under my command, I am first and foremost a medic nin. My duty is to keep everyone alive. Physical well-being is the main part, but mental well-being is, if anything, more important. If someone freezes on a mission or suffers an anxiety attack, they will likely die. Your seal could break if you overstress. I think that you are going to, so when it breaks you could die easily. I want to prevent that happening. He nodded. That was the logical part. That and you are special Naruto. You're a Jinchuriki, even if you are a hider rather than a fighter. You are different and like a child in many ways. You are a good person. Do not forget this. He nodded. He realized he hadn't heard himself described that way before. Now, any other questions, Naruto? Two actually. Tsunade smiled. Firstly, can you recommend someone to train me on chakra channeling? In my fight with the Akatsuki shinobi I found myself without a real power option, and was forced to stall him out until hope arrived. Tsunade rolled her eyes. He nearly killed you. You didn't do a very good job. Exactly. I wished to find someone capable of training me in chakra channeling. My crossbow is compatible with such an exercise. I can conceive of carrying chakra to improve strength or decrease detectability by casting a genjutsu onto the bolt. Tsunade nodded. I think I can find someone to train you in such arts. Give me a day to find someone suitable for it. The second question? Why is there an ANBU outside my door? Tsunade sighed. Sakura did not take well to your return. We thought she had got over Sasuke's defection, but it seems she held out hope that he would return. Silly girl. When she saw you had returned, she worked out what must have happened. I have to give her credit for that. She tried to kill you one night, but Shizen stopped her. She really wanted you dead. You killed both of her teammates, one who she loved and one who she thought would bring the other one back. Naruto nodded. That was not entirely unexpected. Sakura had been nothing but hostile to him in the past, and his actions must have angered her further. Yet he had done only what was correct to do. She's been in TNI, not being questioned, just being given time to think about what she was doing. I have to go and talk to her next. Hopefully she'll give up her grudge. He accepted the information. When he was out of this place, he would be safe enough from her. Tsunade tapped her fingers on the bedside table and clicked her fingers. Oh yes, I also came to check on your medical well-being. Knew I forgot something. Was she really the greatest medic in the elemental nations? She skimmed his chart in about 10 seconds. Well, your body is still not in good shape. The fact is I should never have let you stay escape from the hospital the first time. Your nutrient balance is down again. When did you last eat? He considered. He couldn't remember. I am unsure. She sighed deeply and ran a hand through her hair roughly. You really are a machine. You don't know when to stop. You need to eat regularly, and sleep regularly. If you don't, your body will stop working properly and you will die. What do you like eating? Naruto considered. The Akimichi food had been good when he had had it the first time at the hospital. But it was a necessity, and not a luxury food. What else had he ever eaten? He'd never really paid much attention aside from eating a relatively balanced diet. He did have one memory which dredged itself up from his memory. It was old. Very old. A kindly middle-aged man in a booth, a much younger Naruto. Sitting on a big stool with the Hokage next to him. He was being told about someone who would be taking care of him. The bowl had arrived. Tsunade smiled as a tiny amount of drool formed on his lips. A good memory? Naruto snapped out of the memory. There was a noodle and broth dish I ate a long time ago. Served by a man in a booth? I cannot remember its name, but I remember it tasted good. She smiled. Ramen? The word sounded familiar. Yes, I believe that was what it was called. She reached for some paper and scribbled an address. Here you go. This is a good place to go for the stuff. I occasionally go there myself. If you do go, keep your hood down and talk to them. That is an order. Do not try to hide in public, he nodded. It would be considered polite to do so. Now, another day's bed rest and good food, and then get to the sessions with Hinata. Stay safe, and give it a month or two. I'm sure you can wait that long. He could. He would find things to do to improve himself. It was an odd realization that he had never had more than a day's downtime in his life. Either he was training his skills alone, waiting for or on a mission, or eating and sleeping. Now he had a month or two to do things and face his fear. His side burned briefly for a moment, and he mentally shut it out. He still felt a little tired, and if he was stuck here for another day, he might as well use the bed rest available. He briefly considered that he could get used to long days of sleeping before crashing into it once again. Chapter 43, Ramen. He felt deeply unsure of himself. Everything about this felt wrong. He hovered on the rooftop next to the ramen stand, which looked familiar. The colored covering was a different color, but he remembered the face of the old man he could see in the kitchen. He was the same man, older maybe. His hair was a bit grayer than the childlike memory he had. He felt odd merely observing a target. He wasn't even a target. He could make these observations up close but didn't want to. He didn't want to initiate contact. Normally the only contact initiated was done by means of tanto blade or crossbow bolt. He touched the butt of his bow just to feel a little more reassured that he was safe. He slowed his breathing and descended into an alleyway. Why did he feel on edge? He'd dropped his hood anyway. He felt the slight breeze caress his face through the stubble he hadn't shaved off. He barely saw the point of shaving anyway. Just a few easy steps to the booth and enjoy some food he wanted to eat. He checked he had the funds on him to pay for the meal. He did. His pay had gone forgotten into a bank account, and since he had killed Sasuke in such dire circumstances, the mission had gone up in difficulty substantially. He felt a pang of guilt that he didn't really pay for food like this. Busy Shinobi had a service whereby a selection of foods could be delivered to their apartments during the day. It meant they could train for longer, and that there was more work all round for the ever-growing civilian population. Naruto was delivered to by the service, the old Hokage having signed him up as soon as he left route. He lost that much pay per month for the privilege. This was a new experience, and he should be trying to extract maximum benefit from it. His body was healed, and he could use more practice in social interaction. This was of logical benefit. That thought line comforted him. That was more like it. Clearly defined objective, means of achievement, and logical reasoning. With this in mind, he took a few steps into the open streets. Nobody spared him not much more than a glance as they walked on by. Shinobi occasionally dressed strangely, and the kid could pull off the cloak look. Civilians were used to the occasional shinobi with odd dress sense. Even if Mato guy running in the green jumpsuit was a sight you only needed to see once. He tried to walk calmly, fighting the combat instinct to run from cover to cover immediately. He approached the ramen stand from the side, minimizing the amount of time the girl at the counter had to see him. He berated himself for not taking a frontal approach. He saw the selection of stools and analyzed which one he felt would be best. It was probably beneficial to start with small levels of social interaction, and he didn't want too much attention. A stool at the edge then. That would work well. He sat on the high stool, feeling his legs leave the ground. He crossed his feet behind the legs for added stability. That was a good feeling. He realized he was still looking away and turned his head towards the girl behind the counter who was staring at him with an odd look on her face. Naruto's brain struggled with opening contact. Something friendly, some form of greeting? New contact so respectful? Not too respectful? He was spared a tempting introduction as the girl walked over. She leant on the counter casually and smiled. "Hi, can I help you?" He inwardly breathed a sigh of relief. She had opened conversation. Now, he still needed to do introductions and he had been asked a question. "Yes, I am here to consume ramen." That was good. He had stated his goal clearly, and without undue loss of clarity. Surely this was how people opened conversation. She rolled her eyes and laughed. "Well, yes. This is a ramen stand. What kind of ramen would you like to eat?" She passed him a piece of paper with options on it. Naruto scanned it swiftly. Different varieties of ramen? Was there not one optimal flavor with was the best balance of nutrition and taste? What kind had he had before? Naruto tried to think of selecting a dish. It was difficult. He needed to weigh up so many factors. Rarity of dish, ingredients, price, size. His mind whirred. "I recommend the seafood ramen myself. It's pretty tasty and Dad loves making it." Ah. She recommended it, therefore it had to be good. He checked the entry. There were certainly several ingredients he had never tried, and that must have been part of the eating process. He considered his food requirements, but the waft of scent from the kitchen area made him ignore it as a factor. It was coming back now. I would like a large bowl, please, she smiled. Coming right up, she turned and walked to the kitchen, throwing him a last, quizzical glance as she entered the kitchen. Naruto quickly checked under the cloth that covered the counter. It was solid wood. How was the dish going to rise upwards? Was there some jutsu involved? He checked around carefully for Hyuga, and finding there were none, activated his Byakugan for a second. The ramen stand owners were talking, but neither of them were shinobi. How then was the ramen to appear by rising upwards? A thought clicked away in his mind. It must be a figure of speech, or some form of wordplay to mean that the food would be arriving promptly. It made sense. He smiled, the illogicality of language having been surrounded, examined and broken apart by his mental logic. He waited, taking in the smell from the kitchens that wafted out. It really was quite a pleasant smell. He remembered that smell. The girl came out and cradled her head in her hands, leaning on the counter and looking at him with amused eyes. So, what's your name? Naruto, she smiled. I'm Iam. I've been working here since I can remember. You're a shinobi, right? Yes. I too have been a shinobi since I can remember. Really? Yes. She looked a little saddened by this. Are you an orphan? He looked at her, as she brushed away a few stray strands of brown hair from under her chef's hat. It was somewhat pleasant to look at. Could you take over the kitchen? I'm in need of a lunch break. Okay, Dad. The man emerged with 2 large bowls of steaming broth and noodles. Naruto remembered that sight, only from lower down. He had been shorter then. The man put them on the counter and offered Naruto a pair of chopsticks to eat with. Itadakimasu. They began to eat, and the flavors hit Naruto at the first bite. It was somehow better than his memory remembered. He ate slowly, savoring every bite. The man ate his own slowly, looking at Naruto. It was Naruto, wasn't it? I'm Tucci. You were probably too young to remember. Naruto looked up a little too quickly and felt the feeling of stupidity rise. The man chuckled. I remember you from all those years ago, a lot shorter mind, but the hair color is the same, and the whisker marks. Lady Tsunade also mentioned you might be coming. You seem to have grown up a little since then. Naruto quietly pulsed his chakra. There were no genjutsu around. That was a good sign. The man was likely genuine. He continued to eat, the pace slowly increasing. I remember you ate fast from when you were very small. You haven't changed in that regard. Now, tell me about yourself. Naruto nodded as he swallowed. I am a shinobi. I don't really understand people properly, and recently undertook a long mission in isolation. I do as I am ordered. Sometimes I stare at the stars and fires and things that are interesting. I'm a ghost. The man let out a long whistle and ate a bit more of his food. Sounds interesting. You're not, well, normal. I am noticed that. Have you ever bought anything from anywhere before? No, the man nodded. Well, it explains a lot. Whatever happened to you between last time I saw you and now must have been crazy. You don't seem to have grown up in the traditional way at all. Were you trained by some secret organization or something? He quirked an eyebrow as he said it, his face in a beaming smile. Naruto realized the attempt at humor and tried to laugh. It was a very odd sound and the man looked a little startled. Quite the laugh you have there. You don't laugh much, do you? No. Naruto found that he was running out of noodles in his bowl, and began to gently drain the broth from the bowl. This had been a pleasant meal. Certainly not nutritionally balanced, but he had always kept going. The older man smiled. I take it you enjoyed it? I did. Of that he was certain. His stomach still felt like there was more room. The Hokage could hardly blame him for trying to eat more. He realized the thought made him a little bit giddy inside, like it was forbidden. I would like another bowl. The man smiled. What flavor this time? The type you had, please. It makes sense that you prefer a good flavor as the chef. The man's smile widened. I am. Another miso ramen. Make it a big one. On its way. Naruto relaxed a little. Whilst they were oddly dedicated to a food, Tucci and Iam were pleasant people to eat near. He did not press for details or force him to bring up darker times. It was certainly a welcome break from talking to only shinobi. He realized they were the first civilians he'd ever had extended and non-violent contact with. Another figure sat at the booth and balanced expertly on the stool. Naruto realized they only had one arm. It wasn't all that uncommon. The figure was young though. The older man recognized him. The young man looked familiar, and he realized who it was. He'd met his father after all, Shikamaru. Good to see you here again. How are things? The young man shrugged a little. As usual. Some of the deer got startled this morning, and I had to ease them around and calm them. Didn't take long, but still a bother. The older man nodded sagely. Sounds almost troublesome? That got a sigh. Tucci gave him a playful punch in the arm. I'll get the usual for you. I know how you like it. He retreated into the kitchen and gentle murmurs of conversation emanated forth. The young man turned to Naruto. I wondered when I'd get to meet you, Naruto. How do you know my name, Shikamaru? The boy smiled. The same way you heard mine. People mentioned it, especially after the mission. He touched the stump of his arm that remained. Your dedication to surviving the battle was impressive. I heard you were forced to detonate a tag at point-blank range to win your battle. Shikamaru shrugged. Out of options, really. It wasn't my first-choice plan. Understandable. The boy nodded. So you killed Sasuke. I'll admit that it's bothersome that after all our team went through you had to kill him instead of bringing him back. That sounded odd, like he meant it differently somehow. I had no option. I lacked the strength to fight off the military strength of Oto. It took nearly 3 years to poison him. Shikamaru sighed. Well, I appreciate you dealing with him. He left, and he caused a lot of damage. All of us will never be the same. Naruto recalled Kiba saying something very similar to that. He realized he didn't know the word for what he felt. He certainly felt bad about it, but bad was the wrong word. He knew the pain they had felt, but he didn't know it. He felt like he needed to do something or say something. You're, as they said. You're not sure what you're feeling right now, are you? True. I did not expect you to have such a grasp on emotion. Certainly you are intelligent beyond your appearance and speech. The young man shook his head a little and smiled slightly. Whatever. I prefer the relaxed life, even if I do miss my arm and being with my team more sometimes. I have uses beyond direct confrontation. A specialist like yourself? In theory we could form an efficient team. Naruto considered his non-combat weaknesses. You are an intelligence specialist? Pretty much. I'm interested by meeting you. You're a bit like I expected, although the fact you aren't hooded is unexpected. I was ordered not to. That is expected. The Hokage is touchy and wants what she wants. Tucci appeared with a couple of bowls of ramen. Shikamaru nodded to the man, who decided to keep out of the conversation. They began to eat. Shikamaru talked between deliberate mouthfuls. So then, I'm curious as to your training. You weren't part of our graduating class, and you're not from a clan. So that means you were trained privately. Naruto felt impressed by his eating companion. He was like Shino as he actually thought about things logically. Of course, if you'd have had a private Jonin sensei they would have been introduced. In fact, you only appeared suddenly and sporadically. So no visible sensei, a huge specialization, and if what they've said is to be believed you're incredibly tough. In fact, too tough. You withstand pain and make choices other people can't. That was true. He'd never considered himself to be tough as such, merely that pain was not an obstacle, and logic a straight path. So, that leaves nowhere conventional for your training. So either the former Hokage set up a secret and incredibly harsh training environment for you, or someone else did. Or you're not who you say you are. 2 options. Shikamaru took another mouthful of the food. I'm not sure which one I prefer less. Naruto knew he couldn't tell the full truth. Then again, this was one person who could work him out fully. I was privately trained by ANBU. Technically true. It might have been considered harsh. I don't think the Hokage liked it. Almost certainly true in every regard. That's why the Hokage had brought him into the light. Shikamaru nodded. Interesting. I would find out more, but that would be too troublesome. You are a mystery though. I'm a ghost. Shikamaru smiled. An interesting concept in more ways than one. He got up, and Tucci appeared swiftly to accept his money. The older man watched as Shikamaru walked away, his figure slightly odd from his missing arm. He's a good lad, that Shikamaru. Shame about the mission that ended his frontline life. Were you on that mission? Naruto felt a little uncomfortable, but fleeing suddenly wouldn't be the right way to do things. I was. The words sounded poor and weak coming out of his mouth, and the man looked concerned. Oh. I apologize for asking. It sounds like even you came out of it with bad memories. I apologize for thinking anything less. That was true enough. The words were far too close to the truth. He felt the tingling in his side begin, and he stroked a hand soothingly over it despite knowing nothing would happen. The man gave an apologetic noise. Must be a wound from the mission. Indeed, it was close enough to the truth for him to not feel like a liar. Naruto reached for his money and paid silently. The man gave him a short nod as Naruto walked away into the open. He turned to the kitchen. Poor lad. He's as hurt as Tsunade-sama said he was. Good thing she gave me good warning he was coming. I am nodded. That mission changed a lot. We lost one of our favorite people and it's affected several others. Tucci stirred a pot gently for a few moments as they waited for the next customer to arrive. It wouldn't take long. You think he's cute, don't you? I am focused more on the food she was chopping to avoid looking at her father, and revealed the blush she now sported. I think he'll be back, she sighed. He'd be on about this for days. Chapter 44, Diffraction. From leaving the ramen stand, it had taken Naruto about 15 seconds to get into an alleyway and onto a rooftop with his hood fully up. He ducked into the shadow of a vent and cast his genjutsu. He was invisible, and unless anyone was looking for him, he would not be found. He found himself breathing a little. He was safe here. Safe. He was safe anywhere with a bit of cover and a touch of shadow. He felt the pain in his side drop away slowly. He felt his frustration at the thing's existence raise its head and howl at him. He decided to reflect on it further. He had received it without agreeing to its addition, although in root training it made sense to have it on him. He remembered losing his real eye, his old eye. He recalled seeing nothing until the kunai had struck him, then the pain. He had been smaller then, but he had not cried. He had collapsed a little as he had contained the agony. Then he had been put under by a medic and awoke with his vision different. Lord Danzo had talked to him. He had showed him the seal's true purpose. He had showed Naruto the darker side of seals. Even if he hadn't known it at the time, Naruto knew he had felt a deep disgust at the idea. His lord had encouraged him to remove the memory, to get rid of the thought that his eye had been removed. He had made the hand signs shakily, and then stopped. His lord had looked at him oddly at that stage, but had not forced him. It was one of the few choices that Naruto had ever had. Yet, he had failed at that age. He had not thought about it logically. He had accepted his lord's word as gospel and he had allowed himself to consider using it. His lord had made a mistake. Yet it was his failing that he had eventually used the seal for its purpose, and his duty to overcome the difficulty he had placed. He considered his final interactions with his lord before his time in the base. In the dark. A different darkness, though. Right now he was in the comforting dark, but that his time there had been an oppressive and worrying dark. He knew there were words for this, but the comforting dark was a good concept. He wondered where his lord had been, and why he had not been contacted. Certainly his lord had taken time to contact him in the past without warning, and he was almost certain that he should have been contacted by now. He could contact his former lord himself though. He had time, and it would certainly count as training. Although he felt doubts over the move, the last words still lingered with him. Certainly he hadn't really paid them much heed so far, as he was forced to trust some judgments. Do not trust anyone. Certainly that had to apply to his lord. He considered his entire interaction with the man he looked up to and called Lord Danzo. He barely remembered his pre-training years, but he did remember being taken away by the Hokage for ramen. Then he had been taken to the root base by Danzo. There he had trained and gone on missions. He had learned his craft with bow and tanto blade. He had learned to hide and not be seen. He had learned how to distract and cause illusion, to sow confusion. He had been drilled to perfection, to a point where instinct was to hide and complete his mission. Those principles were correct. They were effective, although not against extremely powerful targets. He would improve his skills to better himself. Regardless of the issue, Root had made him into who he had been. Efficient, calculating and deadly in the dark. Then everything had been changed. The Hokage had taken him into the regular forces. That was a change. He hadn't appreciated it at the time, but it had been the start of something he could never have understood. How could he have? How can you know something you have never experienced and explored? How could he have understood the growing starts of emotion? He slowed his racing thoughts. He was not yet properly in charge of his emotions just yet. The memory eater was clear proof of that. He still did not understand emotions fully. Still, he knew more now. He knew of happiness, he knew of anger. He knew of others he could not name quickly but now understood. He had felt the feeling that he had to drive himself to near destruction because of his failures. He had failed in his execution. Everything really had changed. Had the Hokage known? Had he anticipated the challenges and all the effects of his changes? Somehow Naruto felt the man had not. The man had made a foolish choice in some ways, a choice that he realized had been made by an emotional old man. The Hokage had to have known that his father had been the fourth. After all, it was his duty to appoint a successor. Is that why he had been brought into the light? An old man's belief that he could have been like his father? Foolish. Emotional decision driven by the opposite of logic. Then he had been placed around teams to meet as many people as possible. Hope was dangerous. Was it just luck that he had encountered teammate? Had the Hokage been playing him? Doubts flooded his mind at the myriad possibilities. Then again, Lord Danzo could have as well. After the Wave mission, where his actions had gone far beyond the mission brief, and he had been chided when he had returned from the mission, however, nothing more had come of it. He had at first assumed it was because his actions had been correct, but now, had there been a meeting he had not seen? He realized the enmeshment between the two figures had to have been extremely strong. For one to act in the light and one to act in the dark must have required some communication. Root was separate from the main forces, hidden in the darkness away from vision, but the Hokage had to have known. Tsunade knew from the files that the previous Hokage had likely written. They had needed each other. He thought back to the meeting between Tsunade and Danzo. He recalled how he had been brainwashed into confirming the lie of him being Root. He recalled how he had been surprised. The level of communication, the knowledge of what each side was doing was now hidden from one another. The conclusion was obvious. Neither side of Konoha's forces could be as effective now that they were hidden. Root forces would be seen as hostile targets if found, and regular forces would die to keep the silence. Konoha could end up fighting itself. Then he thought deeper. If either side knew the other, there was no trust. Without that, a second judgment with which to compare plans to, could either truly know what they were doing was the correct move. Then again, he had been trained to think individually. He had been trained to work alone by necessity. Yet with teamwork came additional options. He had felt the advantages of having people by him, and he had to admit it had saved his life. So now both Root and Konoha were weakened, and that was the opposite of what his former lord wished to achieve. Former lord? It was true. He was no longer Root. He reached for his head plate, and drew it out to observe it. He had dulled the metal with soot so it didn't shine, but he could pick out the features. He was a Konoha shinobi now, and he had been ever since the first vestiges of emotional awareness had found him. After all, he now had friends. He had people who showed interest in him beyond his training. He noted the last observation as something he needed to reflect on. That had to be a part of friendship. He considered people who he felt the same for. Hinata, Anko, Shino, Kiba to a degree. It was interesting. Even Shizen and Tsunade could vaguely count. Talon and his team too. Kakashi certainly. Baka, so he was no longer a part of Root. Why did he consider Danzo his lord? He wasn't now. He was just a former leader, his previous commander, yet he felt that the man was more to him than just an authority figure. He had a deeper connection with the man. When he had entered the regular forces, he had felt the need to talk to the man when it was not necessary. He had needed to, not so much as a necessity like air and water, but a deeper need he couldn't place. He felt like he didn't know the words. That annoyed him, not knowing but knowing at the same time. It was as if the man was like his predecessor? The one who came before him. Naruto certainly felt like he had skills similar to the man. Yet his skills were different, but both focused on being hidden and performing their part. He almost felt abandoned by the man. He felt the conflict within himself grow a little more. On one side of his mind, he saw the man who trained him, who raised and taught him. A man who had given him purpose, means, and execution. A man who had forged him like a blacksmith would a sword, with hammer and anvil. Forged into a deadly blade. Root had helped Konoha recover after the attack of the Nine Tails. It had removed malfeasance. It had sabotaged the fought-back advances from other villages that nobody had known. It had melded perfectly, the combination of the Hokage's mind and Danzo's will. An extension of power that was only controlled in the loosest sense by the Hokage. It had worked supremely well. As things became more peaceful, their duty had lessened, but it had still fought onwards. Naruto had done his share. Figures that needed removal were removed. He didn't know the consequences or the wider picture, but he did not need to know. He recalled his final Root mission. The daimyo's son. He had merely had to place some documents in a room, and then shoot the man as he showed off. This had been done. He could guess that the man was corrupt, or that his succession would be a poor result for Konoha. He couldn't be sure though. Then the Hokage had died, and that left Danzo. He had denied the existence, officially disbanded the organization, and cut Naruto loose. He knew the man had had no choice, yet it still rankled with him a little. He had been abandoned and then he had disappeared for years. What had Root done? He'd analyzed this, his thoughts coming full circle. His former lord was now a threat, and a large one at that. It was a troubling thought. He rubbed his head as tiredness tugged at his eyes a little. It had been a couple of days since he had slept. He picked his way carefully across the rooftops as he thought through his schedule for the next days. He had to find a sensei, and he had his first therapy session to go to. He had a fair amount of time to bet through as well. His entered his house on automatic and welcomed the soft embrace of his bed. Never mind that it was only mid-afternoon, he would sleep now. Itachi lowered his hands from the statue as the dragons of chakra retreated once more into the statue of the outer path. The body of the woman that had lain before it was now nothing but a worthless corpse to the Akatsuki. Someone, mostly likely Zetsu, would dispose of it. He felt his body feel heavier from the sheer chakra drain that such an event required. Even for the two tails, it was significant. Every time it felt more and more like part of him was being lost with every sealing. He knew his fellow members would be feeling the strain as well, some more so than others. Conan in particular looked paler than he had ever seen her. The woman sank to her knees and took deep breaths. Kisame merely shrugged as if nothing had happened. The man had so much chakra it was practically as if it was unlimited. With each member lost, the process took more and more out of them. He felt the urge to cough and resisted it. Any sign of weakness would be noted quickly. He took a quick glance at the newest member. The man behind the orange mask. He had controlled his surprise at this, although it wasn't all that unexpected. After all, the man had helped him before, and was certainly strong enough to be considered a threat by himself. He suspected that the man was the real power behind the Akatsuki. He could see Zetsu now favored the man above Pain, who still stood unmoving as he communed with the statue, another of its eyes open in its eternal stare. Haydn was cursing loudly about something, possibly that spending time doing this was keeping him away from his religious duties. The man was a special kind of insane, whether it was his dark powers or his desire to just hurt people Itachi didn't want to fathom. Kakuzu's expression was unreadable as ever. He eyed the zombie brothers with his usual air. He knew how he would take one of them out certainly. Both at the same time would be substantially more difficult to accomplish. Separating them was certainly key. They descended off the hands of the statue to the floor of the chamber it was housed in. It was an ugly thing, a thin, taut face of stone seemingly twisted in a scream of pain. He wondered what could have spawned such a hideous summon such as that. The Rinnegan certainly had many powers he was unaware of, but he was happy with his own eyes. His vision blurred a little from the chakra drain. He too took a deep breath. Zetsu rose up from the floor before Pain. The Kumo shinobi ever so stupid, aren't they? They have ceased searching for her, and now it's too late. Thank you, Zetsu. We now stand only 3 beasts away from the completion of our goal. And peace. The figure raised its arms as it spoke, words echoing from stone walls, reverberating greatly as his proclamation was heard. Can I get back to praising Jashin now? He hungers for fresh blood. Haydn's sneer caused Kakuzu to chuckle a little and Kisame to smile widely, his shark teeth glinting a little in the low light. Patience, Haydn. We still have work to do. What do we know of the remaining beasts? Zetsu smiled on the white half of his face. Kumo holds the 8 tails, so strong, so in tune with his beast, and will prove a difficult target. Kumo is nervous and angry. It may be best to withhold our efforts upon him for some time. Itachi agreed on that front. Killer Bee was not a man to tangle with lightly unless you had very special skills. The 9 tails tricksy fox it is remains elusive. We think so faint, so hard to sense, but it may have been found. Its Jinchuriki is quiet, hidden, dark, hard to pin down. That was true. The Akatsuki were interested by this. Kakuzu spoke, a deep rumble of a voice. Really? All Jinchuriki are powerhouses of strength and aggression when we face them. All call up on their captives to aid them, and all are capable of causing massive damage to targets. How can one hide from you, Zetsu? Or are you simply useless? The two-tone man turned to his taunter. You couldn't find your own heart even if you had 4 others to compare it with. Do not insult me, mercenary. Haydn put his scythe across Kakuzu's path, and the man turned on him instead. Want to be ripped apart again, you religious idiot? No. But Zetsu won't be any fun for you. You know that. Kakuzu subsided a little. Haydn was right. He could rip Zetsu apart with extraordinary ease. Pain's voice echoed once more into the chamber, the orange-haired man's deep voice carrying easily over his colleagues. What of the 3 tails? We await its reformation. Pain looked around. Who shall go to capture it once it awakes? Itachi considered the issue at hand. Pain didn't go, instead holding the stronghold of aim intact with sublime ease. That meant that Conan didn't go anywhere either. It would take something special for him to leave. That left himself, Kisame, the zombie brothers, Zetsu and the masked man. Time to test some thoughts then. Why doesn't our newcomer prove himself? Who are you again? The man flailed round to face him. I'm Toby. I look forward to working with you, Itachi-senpai-sama. That was not his real self. Itachi knew that well enough. He had been aided by the man in the past, and he was definitely more serious than that in his speech and thoughts. Kisame laughed at the man's actions. You must be an idiot. Toby isn't an idiot. Kisame hefted his sword with a wide smile on his face. The intent was obvious. Even if Kisame barely looked interested in the fight he could initiate. The masked man bristled a little before waving his arms around, the comically long sleeves flailing with him. Nasty fish man isn't very friendly. Toby wants a friendly senpai like Itachi-senpai, he sighed. The man's acting was so unconvincing and over the top it would work against Akatsuki. If they had one weakness, it was that a lot of them were too arrogant for their own good, not that it wasn't with good reason. The zombie brothers could not die. Kisame was incredibly strong, and Pain had the Rinnegan, even if he would refuse to give information on it, so none of them considered this apparent goofball to be a threat. It was extremely clever. He could work that to his advantage. I recommend Haiden and Kakuzugo to collect the 3 tails. Whilst Deidara would have been ideal for the task, I believe that those two would be ideal for fighting this foe. Kakuzu's multiple element barrages can take advantage of the beast's singular nature better than I or Kisame can. The stitched-together man turned to Itachi, his face unreadable behind oddly green eyes. Are you a coward, Itachi? Do you think that just because I hold that minor advantage that I and Haiden are better placed to defeat it? It is not a matter of skill, Kakuzu. It is a matter of motivation. I suspect that Konoha will discover that the beast is to reform, and will send strong teams. You know of the bounties that can be collected from high-ranking Konoha shinobi. There will be plenty of dirty work for Haiden to do as well. There was a nasty glint in Kakuzu's eye as he calculated the possible riches. The man disgusted Itachi. He fought for nothing but money, which would be useless to him in the end. What was the point of money if you sold your soul for it? As for Haiden, he did not want to contemplate Jashin. Immortality that requires the wielder to constantly kill. If anything, Haiden was just a bloodthirsty maniac. He could get these 2 removed quickly if he played his cards correctly. Obviously, as the 8 tails and the 9 tails are currently beyond our grasp, it might be possible to send 2 teams. Perhaps Leader Sama could join a mission? Itachi fixed his gaze on the orange-haired and heavily pierced man who returned his gaze with the ringed, purple eyes that the Rinnegan granted him. My purpose is not the simple capture of beasts, Itachi. You know that my role requires me to remain with those that worship their god. Your AIM pawns will not miss their god for a month. Perhaps if you teamed up with our latest member to guide him with your wisdom. The man's gaze intensified. You seem insistent, Itachi. Has the death of your little brother affected you so badly? The man didn't accent anything. It was a deep, slow, deliberate monotone. That made it all the more insulting. That has nothing to do with the situation. His death is unfortunate but not important. The tension in the room was palpable. Setsu knows all the secrets. Setsu seems to know more than you. It is an odd dynamic when you have 7 S-ranked shinobi in the room, and 2 look like they are about to go off. Normally, Itachi would be the peacemaker. Now there was nobody neutral in the room, except one. Toby ran between the 2 men, flailing his long sleeves everywhere. Toby doesn't like fighting. No, he doesn't. Stop being so mean to Itachi-senpai, Leader Samakun. The man bowed repeatedly to the orange-haired man. Itachi kept his gaze on the concentric Rinnegan rings. He wouldn't back down from this. This was what he needed. Everyone on edge. Everyone slightly worried that everything wasn't quite right in the Akatsuki. He was living on the edge of destruction, and he found himself enjoying it more than he had anticipated. Toby looked rapidly from man to man, waving his hands in front of Itachi's face to try and break the gaze. Itachi kept his gaze locked on Pain. The lock was finally broken when Conan turned Pain away from the confrontation. The man stayed turned away after he gently lowered Conan's grip. Setsu, find the location of the 3 tails revival. Then return when it is prepared for capture. Itachi, you will accompany Kakuzu and Haiden when the time has come. With or without Kisame? Without. Kisame actually frowned a little. This is unorthodox of you, Pain. You instructed us to always work in pairs. What have you done to further the plans? Pain spun round to face Kisame, but Conan stood between them. Enough. This bickering helps our enemies and stands in the way of peace. Please desist from arguing. Paper wings unfurled around her to make her appear so much larger. The wings flapped gently and peacefully. Itachi nodded. There was no sense in overplaying his hand here. He could not attract undue suspicion. He turned and walked towards the meditation chambers of the Akatsuki hideout. Kisame followed after him, the package on his back shifting a little as it sensed the anger in the room dying down. That was interesting, Itachi. You seem more talkative than usual. Itachi didn't need to look at his partner. In truth, Kisame was the closest thing to a comrade and a friend that Itachi had in the Akatsuki. I am beginning to distrust pain. Kisame gave out a lengthy whistle. That's certainly interesting. Is it his cowardice that causes you to distrust him? Consider Kisame. How much combat have we seen? The beasts that we have captured? The missions that we have undertaken for this organization? The risks we have taken? What has he done? He provides us with missions and safety, but for what purpose? He will not tell us why he gathers the beasts. I am distrustful of his end game. Will he simply cast us aside at the end? Kisame looked thoughtful for a moment. He did capture the Six Tails, a weakling. A maggot of a Jinchuriki. A broken-hearted fool. The man didn't even fight before being defeated. Pain took on the weakest challenge whilst we fight. It is possible. I do not worry about it. He hefted the blade in his hands with a certainty. It is me and Samahata. If he turns on us, then we will turn on him and destroy him. Indeed. Itachi walked on and Kisame shrugged. Looked like things were going to get more interesting around here soon enough. Chapter 45, Natural. Naruto watched his, for want of a better word, target with extreme care. The man certainly bore a resemblance to the previous Hokage. He had suspected as much due to the same family name. Apparently this man was an expert in chakra flow and channeling into weaponry. Naruto watched a cloud of cigarette smoke rise from the man as he took another long drag on the tobacco stick. He didn't understand the use of such chemicals. He looked up the compound in the small sticks and found none of them had any real usage other than as a mild antidepressant. The smell wafted to him and made him feel a little ill. Naruto had followed the directions from the note that the Hokage had given him. They had been very specific about not having his hood up and introducing himself. He dropped from his hiding place in the trees and walked towards the man. Again he felt the pang of anxiety about being in the open and walking freely towards the man. He felt like activating his Byakugan to make sure that nobody was going to try and kill him. He forced himself to be content with merely looking around constantly. The man looked up as Naruto approached and smiled. Tossing the smoking butt aside and crushing it under his foot, he stretched out a hand. Asuma Toby. Interested to meet you. Naruto hesitated for a moment before taking the hand and allowing it to be shaken. He still found the custom to be very odd. Naruto. Lady Hokage ordered me to meet you for training in chakra channeling. The man nodded. She mentioned that you could use some training. I do have a few questions for you through which I want answers to before I agree to train you. A test. He could do that as best he could. I agree to your terms. The man smiled. List your skill set and normal modes of operation. Stealth, genjutsu, poisons, assassination and long-range combat using a crossbow. Minor skills with tanto blade and blowgun weaponry. Mastery of both solid and non-solid henge and knowledge of the shadow clone jutsu. The man let out a long whistle. Any other skills that I should know about? Naruto considered. Lady Tsunade had clearly briefed him, but could he trust the man? None that come to mind. The man nodded. Good. Next question, chakra nature? Unknown. The man rummaged in a pocket of his flak jacket and produced a strip of pale yellow paper. It looked no Naruto like the litmus papers he occasionally used as a backup check for his chemistry solutions. We'll use this in a moment. Third question, hardest mission accomplished to date. Retrieve or kill mission S rank. The man raised an eyebrow. S rank? Who was the target? Naruto found himself having to think quickly. How much was he allowed to tell about the mission and himself? He decided to stall. I am unsure whether I am allowed to reveal that information to you, Asuma-san. The man seemed not to react perceptibly to the words, but Naruto sensed he understood exactly which mission it had been. All right, I'm done with my questions. I didn't know all of the answers you were going to give except for the one about your chakra nature. Then why did you ask? He was genuinely curious. Surely there was no point except to confirm that a person was telling the truth. What use was that information unless you were interrogating someone? This was clearly not an interrogation situation, so it did not make logical sense. To see how much you were willing to reveal. What you didn't reveal interests me more than what you did. Nobody is around, and I would like you to understand that you can trust me with any information that you give. Naruto nodded, although he felt that just trusting the man was something he didn't wish to fully commit to. I've read your files. You were the one who took out Uchiha Sasuke. That mission was bad for my students. Shikamaru left the shinobi regular forces. Choji took a real pounding and now works with other teams when he needs to. Ino got very scared as well when a lot of her friends came back scarred or worse. Then again, you do not care because you have only met one of them. I do not deny this analysis. It is correct. Asuma sighed and sat, indicating for Naruto to do the same. Indeed. I am surprised at your actions though. You committed friendly fire, and that makes most people stop and lose all faith in themselves. That must have been. The tingling in his side grew a little. He held up a hand. I do not wish to be reminded of it. The man nodded. I understand. I've lost close friends before. The sooner you let go, the less it will hurt. I will not until I know his name. The man nodded. In that much I think you're an idiot, but this is not why I am here. I'm impressed by your dedication to the mission and the fact you accomplished your crazy objective successfully. You killed him off in Orochimaru's base, which is something nobody else could have achieved. How did that feel, by the way? Learning that you had succeeded in the kill, Naruto forced himself to recall the events. Provided he was careful, he wouldn't remember much further. He had finished writing the last bit of his report, and had packed up when Fitch returned to him. The Rat Lord had merely nodded before disappearing to dispel elsewhere, and give him more time to escape. He remembered that he had paused in his movements for a moment, and taken in a fresh breath of the stale air in the vents. That breath had felt more satisfying than food and water in that one moment of final triumph. I felt like I had accomplished something of true worth. I think the word would be triumphant. That got a smile. Treasure that feeling. It doesn't happen too often in shinobi life. The other bit of information you didn't tell me is that you are a Jinchuriki. That I can understand. I am surprised at how you have turned out, though. You are certainly not normal. Surprise makes me deadly, as you might well expect. The man smiled. Good. You understand well your role, and you understand what is a good way of doing things. Now then, let's move on to some actual training, shall we? Naruto felt a sense of weight lifting from him. He had passed the test, even if it had reduced the amount of time he had for training. Asuma passed Naruto the slip of chakra paper, which Naruto took. He pulled off a combat glove to get full contact with the paper. Channel some chakra into the paper and let's see what affinity you are, shall we? Naruto did so. Nothing happened at first. More chakra. Naruto summoned enough chakra to put on a solid hinge. Then enough for one of his shadow clones. That was a sensible amount in and of itself. The paper was reacting, but faintly. He pushed harder than he'd ever had to. The paper darkened very slightly at first, then further and further. Asuma watched in fascination. This was an interesting twist on the normal way things happened. He sighed internally. Why had he assumed that this boy would have a normal, simple affinity? Maybe a wind user like himself, or perhaps fire or lightning. Those might fit worse with Naruto's style. This was unprecedented. Naruto kept going, wondering what it was meant to mean. The paper was nearly entirely black, except for a sliver of shining white at the other end. Asuma knew a little of chakra theory, but this was not in the usual guides. He knew what it looked like, but that wasn't what this paper was meant to test for. He pulled another slip of paper out of his jacket. Try again with this piece. Naruto did so. Having worked out the level of chakra required, he rapidly darkened the next strip. There was still that thin band of shining white as well. Asuma took out a third piece and performed the exercise himself. As he expected, the paper split in two and charred a little, signifying his wind and slight fire affinity. He sighed. Chakra reactive paper was expensive to produce, and even more expensive for a consumer to buy. There was maybe a meter or two roll of the stuff produced in the elemental nations each year that made it to Konoha, made by skilled workers in the land of iron where they would be safe from coercion by other nations. It was just enough to test all shinobi who required knowing their elemental nature, but not much more. It was part of the reason why they only tested people once they wished to learn it, and not just every genin who graduated. Elemental training was time-consuming and difficult, and generally higher-ranking chunin were the starter class. He reached for the instructions that came with the paper and scanned it quickly. The effects for the 5 main elemental natures were known, but there was a bit nobody bothered to read about rarer natures. He raised his eyebrows as the effects he had seen were explained. He put the guide back into the pocket with the remaining scraps of paper. You have a rare nature, that much is apparent. I take it I am not guided by one of the 5 major natures. Asuma inspected the scraps of paper once more just to be sure. Very close inspection revealed that there were tiny cuts all around the edge of the paper. Technically a wind nature, but overwhelmingly something else. You have a very weak wind affinity, but otherwise you appear to have a primarily Yin chakra makeup. Yin chakra is primarily used in genjutsu, is it not? Asuma was surprised at that little revelation of knowledge. Yes, it is primarily composed of the spiritual portion of your chakra, whereas the yang, he gestured to the shining white end, is meant to be the more physical energy of a person. So you are producing a lot more yin than yang, which is unusual. I am given to believe most people produce an evenly balanced split. Naruto considered possible reasons. I might be a side effect of my holding of the nine-tailed beast. Could it be possible that more yang chakra was sealed into me than yin chakra? Asuma chuckled. Don't ask me, kid, I'm not a seal master. What I do know is that this makes your training very different to how I expected. What was your plan for the use of chakra flow? Naruto produced the crossbow and indicated the channeling wire. Asuma studied the bow with some interest, appraising it carefully. I intended to use chakra flow on my crossbow bolts and mechanisms to improve its effectiveness. Whether it would take the form of more powerful shots by sharpening the chakra around them, or perhaps silencing the mechanism completely, Asuma considered the possibility. Charging a bolt with chakra would normally be a prelude to exploding it or making it catch fire. What could yin chakra do to a bolt? He would have to ask Kurenai at some point tonight. Or tomorrow morning. When he remembered to. Good uses. Yin chakra could have some interesting uses, and I will consult a genjutsu expect. I'll try and get her to the next training session. The man smiled widely about this. He considered what he knew of the shinobi forces. Do you mean Kurenai-sensei? The man looked a little shocked for the briefest moment before smiling. Yes. She mentioned you turned up on some of her missions. Did you really get her that angry? We did not share a common viewpoint until some time after meeting. The man gave a laugh and took out another cigarette and flicked it alight. She really didn't like you at first, but she seemed a little fonder after a while. He drew in some more smoke from the cigarette. Why do you actively inhale smoke? Surely there are downsides to such a habit. Do you want to be trained? Yes. Then do not mention that. I get enough nagging as it is. Let's get to some control exercises to get you into the basics whilst I consult how best to use your chakra. Naruto nodded as Asuma drew out his weapons, a pair of long knives that slipped neatly around his knuckles. Now I know you have a Byakugan as well, so activate it. To be honestly, I'm surprised you don't simply use a constant hinge to hide your odd eye as opposed to that strip of cloth. I prefer to use as little chakra as possible to avoid detection. I also guessed that Kurenai or Kakashi told you this information, and that you reused the argument against him. The man looked a little annoyed. Naruto realized he was getting better at picking up people's possible moods from their facial expressions. This was not the time to continue the thought. You really aren't great at getting on people's good sides, are you? Most of my interaction tends to happen when I shoot people with my bow. Fair point. The man shook his head and took another, deeper drag. That's satisfying. Anyway, chakra flow. I take it you're used to applying chakra for wall walking, water walking, and activating scrolls of various kinds? Naruto nodded. He would be surprised if anyone didn't have those skills after even a short time as a genin. Good. This is similar, but instead of merely controlling the chakra in a rough way, you need to mold it a little more. Observe. Naruto did. The man concentrated, and slipped the knives a little further away from his body. A slight blue haze surrounded the blades from his normal eye. His Byakugan revealed far more. The knives were surrounded by another blade, at least twice as long and probably sharper, made of gently rippling chakra. You channel chakra through the blades and form a blade around the blade. The man nodded and retracted the blade. Any idea how? Could you repeat the technique? The man did with a smile. The blades extended again, and Naruto observed with his Byakugan, closing his normal eye to better focus on what was happening. He had to stop himself from simply looking at it from an aesthetic perspective. The chakra was flowing in ways he hadn't seen, like two counter-flowing rivers. Most of it flowed neatly, yet there was interference. He very nearly reached out his hand towards it. It was a fleeting impulse to touch the prettiness. No, there was a zone of conflict in the middle of it, right between the zones of flow. He rotated his view, getting higher to see better the flows and currents. Flat on, you just saw flows of chakra. Edge on, the zone of conflict became a mass of fractured bits of flow. You counteract two flows and use the friction between them to create sharpness? Pretty much. You seem far too good at this. I have good observation skills. Asuma nodded. The thing for you to do now is to just try pushing chakra into your bolts from your bow. You have an advantage in that you can see if it is working. Now, for your suspected chakra type, it might work if you try and visualize the effect you want to work. Naruto felt a little unsure now. This seems like a very open exercise without a clear goal. Welcome to more advanced techniques, kid. There's no manual. Get to it. He touched the wire next to the bow, getting used to the new grip he had to adopt. He swiftly slammed a bolt into place and focused his chakra on the wire. No matter how long it took, he would master the use of this art. He had to if he wanted to live. Chapter 46, Therapeutic. Hinata waited nervously in one of the psychiatric ward's many rooms. It was painted in pale, calm pastel colors. Gentle blues washed around the room, and the carpet was soft. There weren't any real sharp corners in the room either. Soft, warm light illuminated the room from smooth lamps. The furniture was soft and spacious as well. All in all, it was as threatening as a newborn puppy, yet the place felt odd to her. Here she really crossed the line from nearly retired to taking on her highest rank mission yet. A mission that even her father had been unable to find disapproval for. Being specially hand-picked by the Hokage herself helped her cause as well. Still, she was unsure of what she was meant to be doing on this mission. Talking to people was fine, but forced talking was slightly more awkward. She didn't feel comfortable with the concept at all. She looked over her briefing notes once more, and sighed at the objectives. They were so direct, so unthinking when compared to a human's being. They had to be, but the necessity depressed her. Objective 1. Track the psychological progress of the patient. Objective 2. Help patient overcome past psychological stress events. Objective 3. Force patient to relive events to help. Objective 2. In particular reference to any sealed memories. She had looked over the sealed memories part a few times, but couldn't find anything in the file. Yet it was very specifically there. She checked the clock. She had arrived early, but surely that was to be expected. The second hand was ticking closer and closer to the hour. Was he going to be late? As the second hand hit vertical, there was a very odd knock at the door. It wasn't exactly loud as such, nor was it a particular pattern. It was a single, almost quiet knock. It was as it wanted to be heard but only by one person. It was oddly muffled in that regard. She summoned her courage. Come in, Naruto. Naruto got in through the doorway and shut it very quickly. She felt a little bit more relaxed by the fact he was clearly on edge as well. She saw his gaze rapidly flit around the room, taking in everything that was there. His face was hard to read with his hood up, but she thought he didn't like the room all that much. That said, he did take a second to settle onto a sofa, as if assessing its comfiness. She took a seat in a chair a little apart from him. That was a good start. Some good distance, but close enough. Naruto-san, Hinata-san. There was a moment of quiet. Naruto removed his hood in a sudden movement. She wondered if he was capable of slow and steady movement. How are you, Naruto? I am alive, and my new training is proving interesting. What is the training? I am to learn chakra flows so as to empower my crossbow bolts with chakra. As of yet, I am not sure what effect the chakra will have on the bolts. Hinata smiled. He at least had something else to focus on instead of just these meetings. Naruto continued. Were we not supposed to be working on my psychology in these sessions? I know, Naruto-san. In truth, I am a little nervous at the prospect of these meetings, and I did wish to know how things were outside of these meetings. She was surprised to see him blush the tiniest amount. I also held thoughts that they would be uncomfortable, which is foolish. These meetings cannot possibly cause me harm unless you decide to attack me. Given that we are both calm, I feel that this is unlikely. She realized he didn't need subtle treatment to open up. He didn't need careful handling. He just needed a direct, goal-oriented approach. She realized why her instructions had been worded in such a manner. It was not a degradation of him as a character, it was merely an understanding from Lady Tsunade of what he was. She considered her instructions again. How have you been feeling recently? She saw his body shift posture just a little. It was so fast she barely caught the change in him. I regret that emotions are something I do not have a full grasp of yet. It vexes me. So I apologize in advance if I am unable to fully put into words some of the emotions that I have felt. Hinata nodded. She could interpret as anyone could in this situation. Do your best to describe it. I have been happy, insomuch as I understand it, with my new training. The sense of purpose makes me feel like, feels correct. What is the word for that feeling? Hinata thought before realizing that instinctual answers were likely to hold more truth than thought out. Contentment? Gratified? Naruto seemed happier with that. Yes, gratified. I find gratification in my work. I had been feeling ungratified with my lack of purpose since being taken off missions. That much was understandable. Anything else? I discovered a new food I enjoy, which made me happy. The food was certainly nicer to eat than my usual diet. Hinata smiled at the human trait. He had a favorite food. She could press on with this. Which food was it? I believe it is called ramen. She nearly laughed. Nearly. I like ramen as well, but cinnamon rolls are my favorite food. I have a bit of a sweet tooth. I like ramen for the range of flavor that is possible, and I can eat more of it than I thought. I have not tried cinnamon rolls before. A slightly guilty thought entered Hinata's head. I will bring some to a future session so you can try some. So she had an ulterior motive. Tsunade-sama wouldn't really mind. After all, the Hokage was known for acquiring various bottles of sake when the occasion demanded it. She smiled a little and saw Naruto visibly relax. A memory of finding his bedraggled body in the forest came back to her. I hope you smile this time. At the time she hadn't given it any more thought, but at this point it was a reasonable line of questioning. Then she remembered his confession about the maid to her. She would be careful with her questioning. There was a line of how blunt she wanted to be. How have your dreams been recently? He was quiet for some time, but she didn't feel all that awkward about it. She had come to realize that when he was thinking, he was thinking. His mind focused entirely on the thought line, irrespective of anything that wasn't life-threatening. My dreams have generally been calm. I do not picture much most nights, but those that I do, the images are peaceful. She cast her mind back to the report. Dreams were mentioned several times. How do they compare to the dreams you had on your mission? Which mission? She didn't know what to call it really, and produced the report. She didn't want to voice the name of the mission that had taken him away, even if she had to try and move on. This one. He paused and thought again. If you have my report, albeit the book version of it. What do you read into my dreams? It was possibly the most human interaction she had had with him for some time. He wasn't outright not answering the question, and he wasn't answering either. He was challenging her, almost like he didn't want to say, your memorable dreams are of 3 faces. Correct. She would have to dig deeper. She felt a redness start to build in her cheeks as she considered who one of the faces was. Can you tell me anything more about the faces? She met his one-eyed gaze with her own. He was definitely not telling her everything. Was this him not thinking she was good enough to talk to him? He was acting normally for a human, which was abnormal. It was making her nervous, and it was showing. She tried to stiffen herself. After a few long seconds he finally spoke. There are 3. 2 made it hard to sleep and 1 made sleep easier. It was certainly more than she had got before. It felt like she was digging the information out of him. It wasn't how she should have been going about it. Then again, being a soft touch wouldn't work either. She had to be bold but direct, but subtle at the same time. It was a little like him. How did he manage that? Was I one of the faces? There was silence. His single eye blinked for just a second, and she could have sworn it looked away despite his body simply not moving. Yes. I memorized your face on the mission to the border where we joined up with Team 10. She remembered the mission. She remembered a fireside scene where she had looked into his eyes as she had spilled out her feelings in a rush she had never experienced before. How different that scene looked in the past compared to now. She had lost control, she had seen all of him, and got an apology. She had started to count him as a friend then. She realized that she shouldn't have even thought twice about this mission. She should have accepted immediately just to help him as a friend. She had to judge him for something he might not even have done. He had done it though. She felt torn for a moment before realizing she was blushing a bit, and had been quiet for a while. Why? Your face was a true picture of that which I did not understand and what I still do not understand. I could see in every line of your face, in your eyes and your lips. I could see how you were feeling something far deeper than anything I could conceive, and I memorized it. I memorized it, and it represented something mysterious but calm, something I did not have. She turned away to regain a little composure. The report had been well written, but even then she had never suspected that under his exterior was something inside like that. He was a poet in a warrior's shell. Still, he was her patient, and someone she had to help. That's very deep. Now your report finishes inside the base, but the mission did not conclude until you were returned to Konoha. She was taking these words from the Hokage, but they were effective at what she needed. He was suddenly very quiet. It wasn't just silence, it was as if he was killing all sound in the entire room. I simply passed out from the feedback due to a shadow clone. She could tell he was lying. It looked like he was almost physically hurt by it, twisting a little in his chair. She wanted to accept it, to move on and to leave him peaceful. Could she continue? Could she continue to twist the knife into him to get to the truth? What really happened? I do not know. I have sealed away the memory and run from the pain. How? He stood, staggering a little. She nearly rose to catch him, but he held out a hand to steady himself on the arm of the sofa. He raised the side of his shirt. At first she only saw his stomach, which looked healthier than before by some distance. Then she saw the huge mass of seals that covered the flesh. His finger was touching what looked like a small part of a much larger seal, the memory-eating seal. It works by sealing off the part of the soul that carries the memory. Hinata found herself shivering as if the temperature in the room had suddenly dropped. She wanted to reach out and brush the skin, but was that a good idea? Would that make things better? Would he react well? She kept her distance, but he had noticed her shaking. Are you cold or scared? She had to suppress anger because she knew he wasn't being unkind. She didn't think he could intentionally be unkind. Scared, he gave her a long, lingering look directly into her eyes. She held the gaze steadily, unable to tear herself away. I understand. He looked at the clock, pulled the hood over his head and left the room suddenly. Hinata unfroze just after he had gone and looked as well. Exactly 1 hour had passed. She sighed and began to make notes on what had happened. He had revealed the source of a major problem and it frightened her badly. Did her Hokage expect her to break the seal and unleash the memory? That would be terrible to do to another human person, let alone a friend. A friend? Chapter 47, An Alliance of Convenience. The Akatsuki base was quiet. The great cavernous structure was hidden beneath the city of Aim, hidden in the maze of pipes and drains that dealt with the odd and constant rainfall. There was more than enough space in the system of winding caves for an Akatsuki member to be alone and think, practice, or simply destroy things due to being angry. Itachi sat in his own personal cavern and stretched out his mind. He was glad for the downtime in some ways. Whilst it kept him away from the surface and the small dangers that Konoha shinobi with skill and a suicide complex could pose to him, it kept him out of the loop for what was going on. Still, his illness would advance more slowly if he rested more. That gave him more time to think and prepare. How did you kill the zombie brothers? He had known that for a long time. He could evaluate an enemy and work out his weaknesses and had done so for all his Akatsuki comrades. Haiden he would simply need to immobilize. The man's skills were certainly unique, but once you knew what to worry about they could be neutralized with ease. Whilst he was sure the man had other jutsu to fall back on, he suspected it had been a long time since he had used them. Of course, that was assuming that Kakuzu simply sat back and laughed at him. It wasn't all that unlikely given their interaction, but Itachi left nothing to chance. He would have needed to separate them first. With Haiden isolated, he could be picked apart with little to no difficulty. In the most literal sense, Kakuzu on the other hand was a much more interesting challenge. He had to be killed 5 times before he stayed dead, unless you got him to overextend himself and release the hearts from his body to attack independently. He'd always wondered why Kakuzu did such a thing, releasing them from his person to attack opponents when he could do so himself, or join the massed hearts to himself for even more firepower. Either way, it was an arrogance the man shouldn't have. Still, his foe's flaw was his weapon, and Itachi was proficient in its use. He would take out the hearts separately as they separated, as many concurrently as possible, either trapping them or using powerful attacks. With the hearts wasted, Kakuzu was as powerful as a normal shinobi. He could be outmatched. He was powerful, but he was better. Of course, this was without using his eyes to their full potential and simply burning them away. That would be wasteful. The question of how best to integrate his strategy with that of Konoha was still of interest to him. When Zetsu returned with information, as he surely would, then the brothers would be dispatched. He would have to find a way to betray them without the two-tone man noticing it. He mused about the possibility of killing Zetsu as well. The man was unknown though. He was almost entirely the pawn of pain. At least apparently so. He suspected that someone else pulled the strings. His musings were interrupted by the soft sound of footfalls entering his area. He could hear from the sound who it wasn't. They weren't heavy enough to be Kisame's or Kakuzu's. They were light. Soft. Planned. It was either Conan or someone else. Someone he should have expected sooner. Itachi Senpai-kun. The voice was so infuriatingly calm it verged on smugness. The voice of the one person who he really concerned about finding out. You. Yes, Toby is here to visit you. The masked man strolled into Itachi's chamber with elegant strides. Why so glum, Itachi-kun? Surely Toby can make you happy? Drop the Toby act. I know you better than that. Something in the man's demeanor changed slightly. Maybe it was the slant of the shoulders, or a subtle shifting of muscles under the Akatsuki robe. Whatever it was, it caused the man to seem suddenly very different. You are stubborn, aren't you, Itachi? You were the night we did our dirtiest deed, and you still are. You remain as unknown as ever. I can see your eyes, though. They tell me much. The man stood still and stared at Itachi. He could see little in the eye holes of the mask, but eye holes meant that there were eyes behind the mask that needed them. He looked into those holes, trying to avoid the captivation of the orange and swirl mask. It was amazing the lengths that this man had gone to keep opponents distracted. He could see the red of the Sharingan in the eyes, the baleful red. They tell me that you are either Uchiha or stole the eyes of them. They tell me that there is far more about you that I want to know. There was a laugh from behind the mask. It sounded rough and choking, like wood on being planed across its grain with a rusty implement. And yours tell me that your sight deteriorates. How long until it is gone, Itachi? What is your purpose and goal? The man gave the coughing laugh again. So direct? I give you enough credit to not bother with any subtle approaches against you. The man clapped his gloved hands together once, and once only. Very good. Well then, since we are going to be honest, I will answer one question of yours for each of mine that you truthfully answer. For each you refuse, I can refuse. Very well. The two men began to pace around each other, as if they were planets orbiting an invisible star. Who is the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails? Who are you? The man gave another grave, dry laugh. Very good. Given that we've got our own little mysteries hidden away nicely, let's get to actual useful questions. What do you plan to do now that your brother is dead? I intend to find and kill the person who killed him, and prevent pain from gaining the tailed beasts. The masked man let out a long whistle. Bold words. You would betray our entire organization for your own goals. You would die for them. Respectable but foolish. What is your endgame? I will unite the tailed beasts, become its Jinchuriki, and cast infinite Zikatoyumi on the moon, bringing eternal peace to all the people of the world forever. That much surprised Itachi. An interesting goal. Yet I wonder if your eyes can cast such a genjutsu. I'm sure you are aware of the nature of the Mangekyo Sharingan. Itachi sensed he had hurt the man in some way. His posture became a little bit more aggressive. It is an obstacle I hope to overcome with significantly more ease, but certain assets have been lost on the road to progress. Assets like Orochimaru, Kabuto, and my little brother? He let the last few words drip off his tongue like treacle. The man growled. Assets like your knowledge of the tailed beast? I know you were in the town when the attack happened. I know you were in powerful places then. Don't act like you haven't known from that day the truth about the Nine Tails, the day you attacked? I remember it. You caused more harm than I thought possible. You took the Hokage and many good friends away from us. The man seemed to shrug a little. They stood in the way of my plan and paid the price for it. I have no regrets over it. I sense that you do, mostly that I do not know more about you. They continued to circle like fencers, each looking the other in the eyes. I have something to offer you then, Itachi. Really? An alliance of sorts. You no longer wish for pain to succeed, and neither do I. You need to start killing people in this alliance off for your goals, and I need them to die as well. Itachi quirked his head sideways a little. How do you propose for this to work then? Would it surprise you to know that Zetsu is, shall I say, a clear ally of mine and not of silly little Pain? I would be interested. What level of control do you have over your pet? My pet? If there was surprise, the man's voice didn't show it. Zetsu. Care to share what he actually is? Itachi imagined a curl of a smile formed on the man's face behind the mask. No. Let us say that if I ask him to remain silent, then he will do so. And how long would such an agreement on our part last? As long as it would need to until our paths become less compatible. They stopped and looked one another in the eyes once again. Itachi tried to get the measure of his opposite. There was no obvious deceit in the man's words or body language, but it was somewhat hard to tell with him. Yet, he felt inside he could trust this man in this matter. Whilst they could work together, synergy was better than working apart. He would just have to betray the man before the man betrayed him. That would be simple enough. He extended a hand to the figure, who gave another graveling laugh. Please honor amongst us? The figure turned and his personality and body language shifted again. Toby is pleased to work with Itachi-senpai. He will use the training he has given. The man bounded away, waving his arms wildly around himself. The act was so over the top, so ridiculous that nobody would question it if he kept it up. That much Itachi had to concede. His plan had suddenly become a lot simpler. A few weeks later, Asuma wondered how he had managed to convince himself to be a part of Naruto's new skills test. It wasn't all bad. He had managed to ensnare Team 8 as well. At least Kurenai had managed to convince them. Hinata and Shino had been at least a little keen to help. Kiba had been slightly more cautious and slight bribery had been required. So the four of them now stood facing Naruto, who had his crossbow out and loaded, and pointed at the four of them, or at least in their general direction. He had supervised Naruto's training and knew that the boy was definitely skilled at what he did. Each session he came in and worked at his craft. The shadow clones helped, if he adamantly refused to make more than 2 at any time. Now he was ready to properly field test his new techniques. Although why Hinata got to stand at the side with Kurenai and Shino, Kiba and he had to stand in the line of fire vexed him a little. Kurenai told him to be a man, and so he had no choice in the matter. Naruto was currently running a final inspection and oiling for his bow, and it wasn't helping with anyone's nerves. Kiba was rubbing his shoulder meaningfully. You do not want to be shot by that thing. It hurts. Kiba, I'm sure Naruto-san will not aim to kill us. I'm sure his levels of precision are more than sufficient that his new technique will lead to irreversible harm. I'd just rather have a full medical team here just in case. You know he hasn't tried to kill you yet, Shino, only because I have remained on what I would tentatively refer to as his good side. Asuma gave Kiba a look that could only say shut up. Then he lit a cigarette and took a long, calming drag. Naruto slowly loaded a bolt into the mechanism and raised it to his shoulder. Kurenai raised her voice, trying not to giggle at the look on her team and Asuma's faces. Alright, Naruto is going to test his new technique. He should be hitting the wooden post you are standing around, which represents someone he actually wants to hit. Do not move. Then why do we all have to be? Fire when ready, Naruto. Kiba shut up as the wait for Naruto to fire seemed to drag out longer than it should have taken. Kiba blinked and suddenly the world sounded very, very different. His heart was thumping like 1,000 drums in his head and everything felt louder. His vision swam as he began to lose balance. He dropped to the floor, the sound of his striking the ground sounding like the collapse of a building. His breathing sounded like a hurricane, and it was starting to give him a headache. Then he heard the soft press of a hand on his back and the noises stopped. He rose to his feet and scowled deeply at Naruto. That was unpleasant. What genjutsu was that? Asuma smiled. Naruto hadn't used hand signs for that, instead charging the bolt with his chakra to create illusions without hand signs. All it was limited by was how much complexity he could, for want of a better word, code onto a bolt. That is his new set of techniques, Kiba. This could be a learning afternoon for us. Shino nodded at Asuma's assessment. It was fortunate that he had actually paid more attention than Kiba in Kurenai-sensei's training on genjutsu breaking. Even so, the sudden genjutsu application was disorienting. Quite. Kurenai turned to Hinata. What do you see when he fires? There was chakra pushed into the bolt just before he fired, and it spreads on impact about 5 feet. Kurenai was impressed. Area of effect genjutsu required more chakra and control than your average genjutsu, which she knew Naruto had. This was a fusion of individual and area effect genjutsu, capable of tying down multiple opponents for easier shooting. It gave him options certainly. The next shot kanonied into the post barely an inch above the next, and the 3 targets all winced as they tried to dispel the illusions. Naruto was busily checking his crossbow. Kurenai called to him. Everything alright, Naruto? Yes. The technique is working, but I think it changes the bolt somehow. That was inaccurate. Really? A third uncharged bolt clanged into the end of the first shot, and a fourth into the end of the second. Asuma caught both as they rebounded. Some warning would be nice. Apologies, I have finished testing the genjutsu bolts. Kiba wiped his brow and Shino looked unusually happy about this development. Naruto loaded a 5th bolt and took an almost relaxed aim at a boulder nearby. He fired, watching the bolt impact the rock, chipping off a small section. Then he loaded and fired again. There was no sound at all as the bolt moved through the air even more effortlessly than it seemed to. It stuck gently in rock with a suppressed noise. Asuma walked over to the rock and took a grip of the bolt, pulling it out of the stone. Not bad, you could achieve better with wind chakra though. I could have sent the bolt through the boulder. Naruto retrieved the bolt. That would not be the purpose. Did you hear anything when the bolt was fired? No, but that's actually very useful for you, isn't it? Naruto nodded his agreement. Asuma smiled. Well, I've taught you as much as I can in this area, which makes me an awesome teacher because it took you only 4 weeks. Now then, your other skills need work. Naruto realized he had overfocused a little. Although he didn't enjoy his other skills as much. Yes, taijutsu was an art in itself, and weapon technique other than his crossbow were sometimes nice. Yet it was when he was being stealthy for that single shot that he really felt at home. Skulking his foe through a facility for days to get the kill, he found himself almost longing for a simple assassination again. Then he realized he had lost all focus for a few moments. Let's work on your taijutsu. Spar with. Kiba practically leapt into Asuma. Kiba. He seems enthusiastic to spar with you. Taijutsu only, no weapons. Even as he understood the point of the exercise was to improve his taijutsu, he felt the exercise was unfair. Kiba was a specialist in the art. He shed his cloak, the large garment unsuitable for close-up fighting. Kiba moved opposite him, stretching his arms theatrically. They both knew how this would end then. Naruto took up his stance and waited for Kiba to move. The instinct to have a kunai or a wrist knife ready was strong. His hands itched for a weapon because he knew he would need one. Kiba circled him and Naruto turned slowly, making sure to always be facing him. He remembered his spar with Niji and how he had won that. He didn't have any of those weapons now. Kiba pounced and Naruto rolled aside. Kiba landed and spun. I yield. What? Kiba looked confused as Naruto crossed his arms. Asuma sighed. That's not quite the point, Naruto. I wanted to see what your style of fighting was. Oh. It is defensive, and usually I do not engage in taijutsu unless it is with a clone. Even then I use it to wear down opponents as opposed to defeating them. I also prefer to use weapons whilst engaging. Asuma put his head into his palm and sighed. Kurenai laughed a little. Shino stepped forwards. Naruto's taijutsu is primarily weapon-based and relies on sudden strikes from unexpected areas. Direct intervention is not something that suits his modus operandi. Asuma smiled. You could try enhancing your blades with chakra as well, although that will be harder to keep up in a fight than single crossbow shots. I'm still concerned about what happens if you enter a fight with someone fast enough or clever enough to be able to engage you directly. I simply do not get seen or reveal myself to them. If they do find you and you are no ready, what do you have as a backup plan? Naruto considered. Shadow clones certainly, and his other more hidden talent, untrained as it was. Or fleeing. He'd used to be resigned to simply dying, but with Akatsuki, he had options he couldn't really talk about. I encountered such a situation. I survived until backup arrived. Kiba grinned and Hinata smiled a little as they remembered coming to his aid against Deidara. Shino seemed less enthusiastic about his idea. I recall you were heavily injured in that short time. Naruto felt a slight pang of annoyance towards Shino because he was right about the injuries. He recalled being told never to do it again by Shizen. It worked. Once, a risk is doing it once. Performing it twice sparks of carelessness, and 3 times speaks of foolishness. If nobody had arrived, I didn't know Anko-chan was going to arrive. Regardless, if she had been intercepted, you would have died. That was probably true. I just do not feel that the skills increase I could gain from additional taijutsu skill would lead to a meaningful increase in mission efficacy. Shino nodded. Whilst true, it also makes you at risk of dying every time you go on a mission where your opposition can perform even high chunin level taijutsu like Kiba. I am at least jonin level. Kurenai chuckled, a shrill noise that Naruto found pleasant. You'd be a jonin if any of your other skills were that high too, chunin Inuzuka. The boy sagged and muttered something under his breath. Kurenai merely had to catch his eye and raise a single eyebrow to get him back in line. Asuma stroked his black beard thoughtfully. Both boys were right on this, yet there had to be room for improvement. Naruto, what weapons do you use defensively? Usually my tanto, kunai, sometimes an acid mist if I have time to prepare it. So straight-bladed weapons? Naruto nodded. His mind thought about the possibilities. You imply that another type of weapon might suit my defensive style? Yes. If your style is defensive, then an entangling weapon might suit better. Shino nodded. Indeed. My clan has occasionally used a weapon known as the Kozurigama. It has fallen out of use since greater integration with our hives, but all are given some basic instruction. I would welcome you into our clan if you wish to learn more. Naruto could see slight concern on the faces of everyone else. He took in each of the expressions quickly and then back to Shino, who remained impassive. Is there some reason why I might not enter the Aburame compound? Shino shrunk back a little. Hinata seemed surprised by something, but was somewhere between smiling and looking away. That is perceptive of you, Naruto. You can see our unease, even if we shouldn't carry it. Shino's clan is very secretive, and much of Konoha is, well, scared by his clan. I have no such fear. When may I take up your offer, Shino-san? Shino raised his head enough for Naruto to see a slight smile on his face. I will consult with my father and will get back to you. We would be honored to have you round for a meal before we can further discuss our options. Naruto nodded. That wasn't as hard as he had been expecting. Something about Shino's honest and straightforward approach really worked for him. Asuma smiled. Well, that seems to have sorted itself out nicely. I'm not an advanced instructor in weapons, but I think I can find you someone who is when you need me to. Thank you, Asuma-sensei. The man smiled. Well, we're about done for the day. Unless you want to join Team 8 for their normal training, you're done here. Naruto was about to leave when something in him held him back. He was so used to training alone, and being alone when, a lot of the time, yet he didn't feel like wanting to be alone for a little bit. He felt content around Team 8. He realized he was standing in mid-step and that everyone was watching him. He felt like running away, but that felt like a bad idea. Kurenai decided, after a little pause where she tried not to laugh, to take some mercy on him. You are more than welcome to train with us, Naruto. I would like that. Kurenai smiled. Right then, let's get going. Asuma looked over his shoulder as Naruto began the warm-up routines with Team 8, hearing Kurenai talk as the team did so. The boy was different. Certainly dedicated to the job, dedicated to his craft to a nearly obsessive degree. The best shinobi tended to be. There was a fledgling humanity about him too. It was too late for him to be normal. Not too late for him to be just normal enough though. He lit another cigarette, and smiled as he walked back into town. Tsunade was probably going to like this. Chapter 48: The Hive. Naruto and Shino walked through the town, two hooded figures being completely ignored by almost everyone in the town. Naruto had never been to this part of Konoha before. He'd avoided the Aburame clan's rooftops when he could. The detection abilities of the shinobi within lead him to avoid the place whenever possible. Now he was being invited into it freely. It was certainly odd. It was certainly an action he had not anticipated. Shino opened a door like any other and held it open for Naruto. The hallway it led into was relatively normal and warmly lit. Dark wood dominated the furniture and the decor. A sign of strength yet strangely comforting. Another figure, wearing sunglasses with a high color covering his mouth, greeted him. "Hello? I am Aburame Shibi. Welcome to our home," Naruto replied as best he could. "Thank you for the invitation. I feel happy to be here. I am not sure what the word is for what I feel actually. Describe it to me. I feel that I am doing something that not many others are invited to do, and that makes me happy." The man nodded. "You feel pride at our invitation. You are most welcome, Naruto. Shino has mentioned you in our discussions. He praises your skills." Shino did not appear to react at all to this. The admiration of skills is mutual. Shino is one of the few shinobi I have encountered whom I feel a kinship with in terms of operating method. The man shared a look with Shino. He wondered if the clan had methods of communication other than body language. The clan's style of clothing was not conducive to such means. After a moment, the man turned to Naruto. "Come, allow me to show you the armory." The man beckoned as he walked down the hallway and Naruto fell into step with Shino. A glance at Shino, who gently shook his head, told him it was not a moment to talk with him. They descended down a long wooden staircase that led under the walls. Naruto was noticing more distinctive features about the walls now. They were all wood. There was very little stone, metal, or concrete, aside from that on the outside of the compound, which gave it a cold, stoic appearance. He turned on his Byakugan and nearly stopped moving as the created vision swam into focus. There was life moving through the entire house. Insect life seemed to work its way through the floors, the walls, and everything organic there. It was beautiful. Shino saw his wonderment. "I see you have discovered the hidden secret of our compound. It is beautiful. The only reason I did not conceive of such a thing before is because I did not think about it deeply. The entire house is a hive for more insect life, a symbiosis your clan shares with nature." Shino nodded as his father took over. "It is. As the Nara tend to their deer, we share a deep bond with insects and other similar forms of life. You will never find a spider's web in our house. They prey upon insects. The insects know that this is our hive as well as theirs, and keep the timbers strong enough to hold the house up. If they made their home too large, it would destroy both of our homes. Instead, we have homes inside our home. One thing I do not yet understand is the presence of concrete walls on the outside of the compound houses." The man didn't turn, but Naruto again suspected he was smiling. His posture had shifted slightly, a little more upright. "Konoha in general does not understand our clan, or at least makes little attempt to. If we showed the fine woods of our houses, chosen for their durability and varied for different insects, we would attract attention. No. The less attention we garner, the happier we are. It is why we cover our faces and eyes, a reminder of our service and our part of a greater whole. Only between the most intimate couples is direct eye contact common. Not because it is forbidden, but because it is special to that pairing. We serve the greater hive by keeping our bonds strong within ourselves. There is less glory, and sometimes that can make us feel bitter. Yet we persevere and thrive because we know that the hive, and Konoha, is more important than individual glory." Naruto nodded. They were a part of the machine of Konoha that worked in the dark without complaint. He felt a sense of belonging grow within him. He realized that the staircase was quite long, but did not significantly turn. That meant it extended outside of the walls of the house and towards the center of the compound. All the clan houses are connected beneath. Very perceptive. We are a hive, and so is our compound. In the space below we learn and train, sharing our knowledge and meeting others of our clan. It is a place of debate and sanctuary, of learning and communion. It is our refuge. Should anyone invade the compound, then we would fight them here, in the tunnels. We would extract severe payment for their gain. Naruto felt his kinship grow a little more. This place was like the root compound, but different. This was a place of communion and mutual friendship, the opposite of the root idea. It was organic, the walls gently curved as if they had been naturally carved, not the square angled concrete of the root. The tunnel staircase widened out into a large hall. There were a few dozen hooded or jacketed Aburame around, but Naruto's eye found itself drawn to the great cloud of insects flying above them all. Some of the clan members turned to see him, as if knowing he was not a part of the clan. Shibi nodded to them, and they turned away or nodded to Naruto. He realized he'd never been more of an outsider than at this time, yet he didn't feel worried by this. They entered another sub-passage, and into another room. Again the wooden paneling was very present, the ceiling gently curved yet segmented. It reminded Naruto of some large beetle in shape. Shibi approached a rack of weapons and took one gently in his hands. He spun the chain gently, moving through a practiced routine of swings and sudden slashes with the wicked sickle blade. He eventually stopped the weapon and gently inspected each link of the chain. Naruto, I would like you take this weapon as a token of friendship from our clan to you. I would request to see you face, if you will accept the hypocrisy of this request. Naruto removed his hood, the warm light catching his face. His hair, slightly grown, was showing the beginnings of spiky untamability, and his lone blue met Shibi's gaze. Naruto felt sure the man was smiling from the visible parts of his face he could see. Indeed, I suspect there are multiple reasons for me to offer you this gift of friendship. You remind me of an old comrade who was like you. Naruto considered the man's words. Was this comrade Minato Namikaze? Shino looked round at him quickly, and Shibi chuckled. The sound was surprisingly warm to the ear. Father, may I interject? Of course, Shino. I take it you have come to a conclusion. Minato Namikaze was the fourth Hokage, slain on the night of the Nine-Tails attack. Your words imply that Naruto is somehow related to him. However, I was not aware of him having any relatives of children of any note. Also, Naruto's age would imply that he was born close to the night of the attack. Shibi nodded. Naruto, I will leave it up to you to confirm any of this, but know that the bond one offer with this weapon is stronger than steel and more reliable than the passage of day and night. Our hive will not yield your secrets without your permission. He trusted the man completely. Everything about the clan made sense. The sense of community and oneness was total. Shino, I am indeed the son of Minato Namikaze, but I do not follow his footsteps. He was meant to be in the light, whilst I am a ghost in the dark. Shino nodded his agreement. Yet you are a leader, Naruto-san. Yet your aversion to the light means you cannot be a Hokage. You are a mystery in that way. Yet I feel you hold a deeper secret. You are correct. I am the Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed fox, although it is locked away deep within me, where it can do no harm. Shino seemed troubled, until his father placed a hand on his back. The boy straightened a little at this. Do not be disheartened, my son. Naruto performs a great task without complaint, and he should not cause you to feel any lesser. No. Hold him as an ideal of service and of duty. Be inspired. I shall. The man turned to Naruto and held out the weapon, as well as a band. Understanding its purpose, Naruto fastened the strap about his chest in the same direction as his Tanto blade, and placed the weapon within it. He nodded to Shibi, who returned the nod. If you wish for training, I would recommend Mato Gai or Kakashi as fine users of this weapon. Our clan cannot offer you its training, as our techniques are secret and must remain within the clan. For that I apologize. It is understood. I thank you for the weapon and offer of a bond of friendship. Shibi nodded to him. I invite you to eat with us if you desire. Naruto paused. It was like when he had been invited to train with Team 8. Whilst he had not necessarily needed to train with the squad, he had wanted to. He could eat at home, but the kinship with the clan made him wish to stay. I would like to accept that offer. Excellent. Come, let us eat. They ascended back towards the house, but Naruto remained silent. He was too busy watching the insects move in the walls with his Byakugan like streams of green chakra in some colossal dance. Danzo sat in his shadowy throne and surveyed the small gathering he had summoned. They were his elite, for lack of a better word, lieutenants. Yet they were not. They were not the successor he wished for. That successor was undergoing additional training but was not yet ready. No. They were his elite, strong enough to face any other foe and aware enough to retain creativity. They were the ones he could send on missions for months and expect to return victorious. The ones he could rely upon. They also acted as his counsel in times of need or for a special mission. Root was not in position as it stood. He had lost 5 teams in a debacle. 5. Nearly a fifth of his strength, 15 Jonin-level shinobi had fallen. Their mission had been a success, but not in the way he had planned or envisioned. Uchiha Itachi, the man was a thorn in his side that he could not remove. A rouge piece in his otherwise perfect game. The Akatsuki all were, yet Itachi was the one he feared. Feared. Nothing scared him except a man with more knowledge and secrets. knowledge and secrets that Hiruzen had condemned but turned a blind eye to in terms of punishment. Secrets that would see Tsunade throw him into prison for, or likely worse, Itachi could bring him and root down, and that meant the man had to die. Or Tsunade had to. Konoha was not prepared for the Akatsuki. Jiraiya was too often absent, and the Hokage was not the strongest warrior, despite her victory over the puppeteer. No. There were greater dangers out there. There were men who could slaughter platoons of his elite with ease. If they attacked, they had to be strong. They had to make plans that nobody else would dare create. We planned to overthrow the Hokage. His assembled nodded. They were not shocked. They were trained not to be shocked. They were trained to be minds able to conceive of anything. They would plan to kill the unkillable, break the unbreakable, and do the undoable. He liked the irony of that last statement. I gave you all this brief and asked you to meditate upon it. Tell me your thoughts. One of the figures kneeling before him rose. I conceived of a plan. It involves isolating the Hokage from her guards, and destroying her there. Danzo nodded. We sneak diplomatic messages to her from the land of Earth. They will call for negotiation and diplomacy. The fence-sitter will himself be there. Danzo raised a hand to silence the man. What of the daimyos? How are they kept from involvement? We stage a number of attacks near their castles. This will not only draw away elite shinobi from Konoha, but also keep them within their walls. I reject this plan. It not only invites collateral damage, but also would draw home figures like Jiraiya. The man sat and a second man rose. I conceived a plan. The leadership of the Hokage is the key to their acceptance. I propose to undermine that leadership and force her to stand down. Danzo nodded. It was this kind of thinking that he liked to see. The confidence of the daimyo is key, and so I propose that we kill the current daimyo. Whilst he is a moderate and suggestible man, his successor would be young and naive. Far more easy to manipulate. The hand was raised. That would show us as extremely weak, to let our daimyo die to other forces. Who would dare own up to such an attack? Such an admission would be politically suicidal for any nation, no matter how strong. The lack of trust in them would lead to a decrease in their power. The killing of the daimyo need not be from the hand of an assassin, but rather from the hand of uncooked fish or otherwise. Continue. With the daimyo slain, we convince his successor to remove Tsunade by political force. An ultimatum of refusing missions until she leaves her seat of power. Danzo considered. I reject this plan also. Such a move would lead to another removal of the daimyo. In addition, it again risks collateral and invites attack from other nations. The man knelt once more and the third rose. I considered the problem deeply, but could not come to a conclusion that made sense of the problem. That is unfortunate. Surely you must have had some conclusions to draw from the analysis? None that did not end in excessive damage and death. Only an untimely heart attack of a suspiciously fast-acting toxin could remove her safely enough. Your input is welcome but lacking. I expect more. I will serve more fruitfully in future, my lord. Danzo nodded. It was not the worst outcome. At least the man had come to conclusion. That much he expected from one of his elite. The fourth figure was still a while longer before he stood. My lord, in the view of the other answers I have more questions. Name them. What level of damage is allowed to occur? A level 3 event's worth. Although this is not a set limit provided it elevates us above all other nations. The man nodded. Then I have conceived of an answer. An answer? The kneeling elite nodded. My lord, all actions we could take would naturally lead to attacking our own. We turn our attentions inwards and we forget the outwards. Your wisdom is laudable, acolyte. Tell me where this leads your answer. We require the threat to come from outside. There must be a force to attack and remove the Hokage from power. Anything else would be a lesser result. What threat do you envision, Akatsuki? Any other nation would lead to another disruption of the fragile balance we find ourselves in. The Akatsuki must come for the Nine Tails. Danzo nodded. I came to the same conclusion myself. You have all done well this day, and are dismissed. The figures rose, bowed, and left the chamber, leaving Danzo on his Spartan throne very much alone. It had come to this moment. A leader who would not understand him, an organization robbed by fate, and a title that he needed to take for the good of Konoha. He was the Lord in the shadows, yet he needed to bring the light closer. He needed to keep going until it was time. When would that time be? Could his successor that he had planned for and guided towards his path be trusted to follow him? He needed to reach out and contact his chosen. He bowed his head with a slight smile at the power of his own introspection. His chosen. There had been many options for his replacement, but he knew that he would need to train a successor from birth. He had narrowed it down to 2 options by the time the candidates were barely able to hold a kunai, both skilled. both with a past that could inspire, yet only one was truly going to. If he failed, then there were backup options, but they would not be as pure, would not be as good as his first choice. He rose from his throne and walked towards the exit. He would need to advise the Hokage, and talk to his lost son. He would be quiet. He would be secretive. He prepared to leave when a lesser minion came into the room, barely panting. "Speak, my lord, the three-tailed beast is beginning to reform in a lake close to the coast near Kiri. You are dismissed." He pondered this. Whilst it had been known since the fall of Yagura that the three-tailed beast would one day return, it was something he could not plan for. Such an event would be known by now within Konoha itself, and by Akatsuki. He could not risk mobilizing now, there was more at stake. He turned into the darkness and strode onwards. Chapter 49 Entrance. Naruto was surprised when Talon merely landed in his apartment without trying to actively attack him. "Grab your kit and get to the Hokage Tower now." Then he left at speed. Naruto felt a tinge of feeling like something more should have happened before grabbing all his equipment, and began to move. The rooftops blurred beneath him, and he could see other figures moving quickly to the tower as well. One of the figures nearly bounded directly into him. "Darky-kun, Anko-chan." They kept moving. "We need to talk more." Seriously, there wasn't much he could say to that. The tower was rapidly approaching. They hit the walls and kept running vertically before bounding together through the window. Naruto landed first, cloak whipping around him as he did so. Anko landed behind him, trench coat also flying due to the speed of passage. They looked up at the same time to the room in general. Super sexy Anko-chan and the mysterious and handsome Darky-kun ready to save the day. A banner descended behind them as she shouted to the entire room. Everyone was nose silent and staring at them. Tsunade appeared half amused and half like she was about to kill them both. Then there was Shizen, who had her head buried in one of her hands as she balanced nearly a dozen documents and folders in her other hand. Casting his gaze further around the room, he took in more occupants. There were 3 shinobi he had never met before, all of whom looked somewhere between amused and confused. There was Hare and Pig, the latter of whom was shaking a little with pent-up mirth. Then there was most of Team 8. Kiba's mouth was hanging open, Hinata's eyes were wider than she had ever seen, and Shino looked utterly unmoved. There was no sign of their sensei. "Where is Kurenai-sensei?" Silence greeted him. There was a cough from the desk to his right. He turned to see Tsunade gently crack her knuckles. The sound seemed to echo ominously around the office. He felt the need to dive back out through the window. "Naruto, please tell me you weren't in on this." "I was not." Tsunade's gaze turned like beam of a lighthouse and rested squarely on Anko, who shrugged. "Totally worth it." She returned Tsunade's stare, and Naruto was sure that the temperature in the room was beginning to rise as the stare went on. Eventually Tsunade broke the gaze with a dismissive noise. "If this wasn't urgent, I would have you shot by Naruto. Anyway, you're probably wondering why I've summoned all of you." Confetti fired from the cannons that Anko had set up with the banner. Tsunade did her best not to break something. She failed, and the pen she had been holding found itself in several shattered pieces due to the muscles of her fist clenching. She waited till the last bits of shredded paper hit the floor. "In my defense, they were meant to go off as we entered." Tsunade crushed the remaining bits of pen in her hand to dust, which she let fall through her fingers absent-mindedly. "The three-tailed beast is reforming. I hope that by sending a team of normal shinobi on a series of apparently unrelated patrol missions that we will not attract attention from any of the other nations about the event happening. Hence why there are 3 teams worth. Team 8 will go out first. They are known as a tracking team and have an excellent record of border patrol. This will make them utterly unnoticed by other forces in the area. Then a sealing team," she indicated the shinobi beside Shizen, "will depart at the same time as an ANBU and combat team." She indicated Talon's squad. "All teams will converge near, but not meet up. When the event begins completely, then Team 8 will keep watch. The ANBU team will perform combat duties to hold off any enemies, and the sealing team will do what their name suggests. Hare will act as the medic for the squad in combat. Clear? Team 8 are not to engage in combat unless it is completely necessary. That call will belong to Talon." There was a chorus of nods around the room. "Now Naruto, your question. Kurenai is on sick leave, and is unavailable for duties. Hence you will be leading Team 8. Yes, there is a chance that the Akatsuki could show up, in which case I expect you not to engage unless absolutely necessary. I feel you've recovered enough to begin taking on missions again. Welcome back to active service. Sending me at all seems reckless, Hokage-sama. Deal with it. You're leading a recon team now." That was certainly a surprise. He looked at his team to see Kiba and Hinata smiling, and Shino even gave him a nod. "Also Anko, you are attached to the ANBU team. Yes, you get your choice of animal. Oh. How about? Talon came in through the window. Kitten. He ducked Anko's blow, and then collected up the snakes that reared to attack. Oh, don't be like that. Anko gave a humph as Tsunade coughed once again. I think Kitten will do fine, Kitten. If there are no further questions, Team 8, get moving! Naruto joined his team, accepting a pat on the back from Kiba. It was a hard pat, more of a solid thump than anything else. They were soon out of the city gates and off into the forests, moving east. The Akatsuki trio moved slowly through the forests that covered the outer reaches of Konoha, skirting north of the city itself, and moving around it towards the place that Setsu had indicated. Itachi walked ahead of the zombie brothers, who had managed to get themselves into a massive argument for the third time. Call me Stitches, or make another pun about it again, and I will remove your head and place it on a pike so Jashin will see how weak you are. Jashin-sama will never forsake me, you cobbled together old shit. His promises of eternal life are what drive me onwards in his holy service. The larger man caught Haiden by his throat. Last time it was the blood of your enemies. The time before that, the sound of bleeding flesh. Change your mind again and I remove a limb. The smaller man ducked out of his hold. Fuck off. Itachi looks like he's getting annoyed by your constant threats, shitbrains. Who are you calling SH? Itachi looked around slowly. Shut up. The two zombie brothers looked at him for a moment before becoming silent and continuing their march. Oddly enough, Itachi missed the easy camaraderie that Kisame offered. How these two made any progress was a mystery to him. Yes, Haiden couldn't die, and Kakuzu could easily put him back together again if he did, but that didn't make things any better. He idly wondered if Naruto would appear on this mission. The Hokage would be foolish to send him into such a mission, but then again, he did need for the rest of the Akatsuki to know who he was. He had to keep a balance that worked to his advantage. Still, he wondered if he could trust Toby, whoever he was. The man was the only thing that could throw his plans off in this game. He felt amused that this was like a bizarre and complex game of shogi. Except he wasn't playing to win. He was playing to ensure that nobody won because he couldn't. The argument behind him, quieted for a brief time, flared up once again and he decided to ignore it. Haiden wasn't going to die, and Kakuzu was too strong for Haiden to do anything about. It wasn't as if anyone was going to die now, were they? The thought of his imminent betrayal of his organization filled him with an excitement he hadn't felt for some time. It had been an interesting time, keeping Akatsuki away from Konoha and sabotaging one mission there. He knew that Pain's objectives were not the best for the world, yet he had gone with them. Maybe he simply loved the danger of it all. Still, he felt himself tingle and allowed himself a small smile as he walked. At least for a brief moment. He wondered what would occur in his near future, and found himself pleasantly distracted from any anger about Sasuke. The late morning sun dominated a blue sky which had the bare minimum of clouds over it. They sparkled off the barely rippling water of the lake which they had been directed to, creating a vista worthy of a great painter. Naruto once more gazed in wonderment at the sight before him. It wasn't the perfect light off the water, or the soft birdsong and occasional fish leaping from the water. The great mass of water of coalescing and flowing under its own power. Strands of chakra moved like waves underwater, sudden currents and flows that did what they desired. Fish who hadn't known anything other than peace suddenly found their world a surprisingly different place, as was all life in the lake. They weren't necessarily jumping so much as being tossed upwards by sudden vortices of water that didn't break the surface. This time there was a difference. This time there was somebody there seeing what he saw. He wasn't the only one staring at it. He took a quick glance at Hinata to see her enraptured by the same sight as well. Kiba was looking at them both in a funny way. What's so exciting about the lake? I can't see anything. Naruto broke his gaze away. He was meant to be in charge of what was happening, and that meant he couldn't be distracted. The chakra of the tailed beast is slowly coalescing in the lake. It does so randomly, but in threads would be the most effective description. The threads sway in the lake as if they are following some kind of rhythm and dance, and grow slowly stronger with time. I suspect if it were to be watched long enough that features of the reforming beast could be spotted, like watching it form. Kiba looked annoyed. Stupid lucky people with their Byakugan. Any of those going spare in your clan, Hinata? Naruto could tell by the tone of voice that it wasn't a serious comment. He had managed to pick up the skill as he had listened to the conversations that Team 8 had with each other. They were certainly different to those of the ANBU team, who seemed primarily interested in the size of female mammary glands. Team 8 discussed animals, flowers and plants when Hinata got her way, and general chat about Konoha. Naruto had decided to merely listen to their conversations, keeping careful watch. The team was very good at knowing their surroundings as well, their reputation fully deserved. Still, remaining at the lake would invite ambush, and as a scouting team that couldn't be allowed. Ideally, they would not be spotted at all. We take up a patrol path around the lake at a distance of about 2 miles. We then move closer at irregular intervals to check on the lake, and see if we can detect any presence. Do not engage upon detection. Hi! They moved out once again. The forest surrounding the lake was fairly thick, with occasional clearings. Certainly he'd want to stay out of those for combat against S-ranked shinobi. The more distractions and cover he had the better. At the moment, this mission was peaceful enough. The Akatsuki were absent, and he was patrolling an otherwise peaceful area with something to look at that was interesting. He wondered what it would be like when the beast reformed. Certainly it would have a similarly crushing and oppressive feeling to it, which made the air heavy and breathing harder. It would be large and threatening too. Would he have to go as far as he had done the previous time? Hopefully not. That had been difficult and messy to accomplish, not to mention requiring excessive explanation. Certainly the ANBU teams knew, as did Anko and Shino. But would Hinata and Kiba welcome the news? He decided to use one of his perks as team leader and opened a channel to Shino's headset only. Shino, Naruto, is everything alright? Shino had the good sense to move slightly away from the rest of the already spread team. Hinata had the front, Naruto the back, and Kiba and Shino moved in a loose diamond formation between the two. Yes. I wish to ask a question. How do you suspect Hinata-san and Kiba-san would react to news of my condition as a Jinchuriki? There was silence for a moment, as Shino considered the question. Whilst I am sure Hinata-san would accept it, I suspect Kiba would be slightly more cautious about it, and would become a bit more distant. Not because he is unkind, but because he would not know how to react. Also, I would not recommend doing so on this mission, as it would lead to unnecessary tension. Thank you for your advice, Shino. He cut the channel back to group and he saw Shino shift back to a slightly closer position. It was good to have a second opinion on things like personal reactions, even if he suspected Shino was not the greatest at performing them, judging by his clan. He felt that Kiba was oddly the greatest mystery of the team to himself. Obviously, he was a person who felt comfortable with dogs, his own Nik and Akamaru being extremely useful on missions. Its nose was sharp enough to detect where Naruto was, which Naruto found impressive. Still, for all his openness, Naruto barely knew him. He almost felt he should, having shot him in the shoulder some years before. Still, he got along well enough with him. It was just that there was no connection. He checked the Kuzurigama was in place along with his Tanto blade. He knew his eye was working as well, two very real reminders of their kinship. He thought about others he considered close to him. Certainly his contests with Talon, even if they were entirely started by the ANBU captain, were something that he could count. His fight against the One-Tails with Anko was another thing he could count. He considered others. Certainly there wasn't a deep enough connection with Kurenai or any of the other Jonin-sensei to really count them. Shizen? She had treated him personally on 2 occasions now, but that was all professional. Tsunade too, the relationship was of a Hokage and one of her soldiers. Danzo? His former lord had counted at one stage. He was the first authority figure that Naruto had ever known, the first real figure that commanded him. The first he had ever cared about, even if he had been too blunted to see it. Baka. He felt a jolt of anger that he had not discovered the boy's name. Even going to the archives had yielded nothing, his file having a note from Tsunade telling him to earn the right to know it first. That had been aggravating. He felt the burning itch in his side give another hideous twinge, yet there was no one thing that he shared with Baka. The boy had been his first friend because there was something so familiar about him, so easy. He had been the first to want to get close to him. The first to read his reports and want more. Yes, there wasn't one big thing there. Yet the boy counted deeply, more deeply than many of the others. In fact, all of the others, although Hinata felt close. He realized that there were too many factors for once. So many little things, there was no way you could put a numerical value to it. There were some things he couldn't account for that made him worried. He had tried to numerically rank his friendships before, but had postponed the task due to conflicting results. No matter how he tried, his results felt wrong. The method and working was correct, yet he felt that he needed to add values to skew his results a little to be correct. He'd refined his method, but couldn't get it correct. It was as if he was shooting at a target that moved the instant he fired. It was frustrating, but interesting all at once. He refocused from his introspection into the present as he moved the team closer to the lake once again, seeing its full presence moving into view like the moon emerging from behind a cloud. He pondered the concept, and decided to remember it. It would look good in his report after all. Chapter 50. The fan has been hit. Warning. Due to the presence of that lovable murderer Haiden, chapters with him contained frankly ludicrous levels of very coarse language. So much so that an extra cautionary note felt required. The author does not condone using this language around living beings, but accepts that characterization doth demand it. Please do not tell your parents, friends, pet hamsters, dogs, cats, or small trees and bushes about what he says, dropping C, S, H, F both G and the K bomb on unsuspecting living things. When it started, it got hectic very, very fast. Naruto alerted a now nearby Talon as to its reformation, and 5 minutes later a great violet barrier had been erected around the lake by the sealing team. Then there was an explosion, and one of the corners flickered ever so slightly. Then hell broke loose around that corner. Sealed away inside their own protective barrier, the sealing team could only watch as the Anbu and Anko found themselves facing down 3 Akatsuki. That was long odds even for the most elite. Uchiha Itachi and 2 others who looked deadly. The standoff lasted some minutes, with 2 of the cloaked figures laughing at Talon's attempts to not have it end in a slaughter. Then the first crossbow bolt landed and everyone moved at once. Naruto felt 2 of the Akatsuki very quickly break out of his genjutsu, and decided to target the second one. The silent bolt slammed into the man's neck with a spray of arterial blood. 1 down. Then the man grabbed the bolt and pulled it out of neck whilst swearing very loudly. He barely took in Anko going after Itachi and Anbu moving to isolate the other one. He was entirely focused on the man who had stubbornly refused to die. He fired again, but the man was ready, a wickedly edged scythe cutting his bolt from the air with a clang. "Come out, you fucking coward!" He decided against it, and fired another bolt to confuse the man. His first hit had broken the man from the genjutsu, and the second was swiftly dispelled. "Shino! Bleed him dry." The insect swarm descended towards the man, who darted backwards and away from them, back towards where Kakuzu had separated off his hearts, and was unleashing all manner of fury towards the Anbu team, who were dodging it all. He could hear the fury in the distance. "We need to separate him from his partner. Kiba, Hinata, intercept, but be careful." This really wasn't how the mission had been supposed to go. There were not meant to be 3 Akatsuki present in one place at the same time. They must have an information source of their own to know at what time they were needed. There was no time now to worry about that. The more separated the Akatsuki were, the better. There was a distant crash that had to be Anko's fight, but that wasn't important now. Hinata and Kiba moved in on the man from either side. The man swung his scythe around at incredible speed, scattering their attacks. It kept him stationary though, and that was what Naruto needed. He fired another genjutsu bolt towards the man and watched him twitch as he dispelled it. More time not moving. Shino's swarm began to reach the man like tendrils from all sides. The scythe kept moving and the man started laughing maniacally. "You think fucking bugs are going to kill me?" The man leapt free and straight for Shino's position. Kiba caught him from below in a tornado of claws and death. The man's bloodied corpse went flying away and crumpled. He was moving away from his partner, whose battle with the Anbu was certainly intense from the noise. His brief glance showed too many signatures to tell what was going on. Kiba began to approach the fallen man, who suddenly rose into a dive, a black spear in his hands. Hinata dragged him down as Shino knocked the man out of the way. "I slashed your neck open. How are you alive?" The man laughed again. "That fucking little shit scratch?" He tilted his neck to show the place where something had ripped his neck open. "I cannot die. Now prepare yourself to become a sacrifice to the great Jashin." His scythe flew back towards him, and teammates scattered. Naruto shot another crossbow bolt into the man's shoulder, but he just shrugged off the wound with a grunt. What kind of jutsu was this? The man had extraordinary tolerance, and could not be killed by mortal wounds. Decapitation? Certainly removing his head would stop the rest of him moving. He whispered into his communicator, as the undying man kept laughing. "Kiba, we need to try and disable him, or decapitating him. Shino, keep trying to drain the man. Remain cautious. He hasn't tried any other jutsu or techniques yet." Teammates spread out around the man, who decided to inspect his scythe. He tested the blade with his finger, and smiled. "Sharp enough to harvest you all." He sprang for Hinata but took another bolt to the chest for his troubles. It made him stumble a little. Hinata ducked the clumsy swing and struck rapidly upwards. The man recoiled a little but showed no effects in his next swing. Hinata rolled away. Naruto had to admit that her offense was certainly fluent and improved from previous occasions. The man was still laughing. "Ooh. A hyuga. How scary. Look at me shaking, you fucking bitch." Insects swarmed onto the man once again, and he shouted some more words Naruto wasn't sure he'd heard the Anbu use before trying to attack once again. It didn't make any sense. Yes, he could take unlimited punishment, but why the extremely sharp weaponry? Why the lack of ranged attack? Was it a psychological tactic to get opponents to cease engaging? He loaded a bolt with an explosive tag. More powerful shots were good, but they weren't powerful enough to remove a limb. This certainly could. He aimed carefully as Kiba knocked the man back before Shino pulled him down. The man smacked the bolt aside, and Naruto cursed the fact that he couldn't cloak such a shot without detonating the tag. You shit-faced pussy! Fighting with a crossbow? What are you, a genin? No, a tactician. If it wasn't for his stealth aspect, he would have loved to give the smack talk right back. He loaded another explosively tagged bolt and prepared his next shot, changing position to be a little closer. He watched as Kiba and Hinata once again combined to keep the man in the same area as Shino's bugs, and the man gave a furious cry. Get you bugs out of my neck! That was good to know, but they could only do so much damage. Once more, the massive scythe swung furiously, keeping teammate at bay. It was a standstill of a fight. He needed the right moment. Shino, turn him around. Teammate shifted positions, and the man kept laughing. Look at the little scout team. Can't hurt me? Naruto fired. The bolt was caught in one of the man's hands before that hand ceased to be attached. The man gave a yell of pain and waved the stump around. Oh. That felt good, that's what I want. Now then, I've shed some blood in this. Your turn, fuckers. The man moved faster than Naruto had seen him move, and teammate clearly wasn't ready for him, and they fell back from the scythe. Eventually Kiba came too close, his injured leg not quite working to its full. Shino pulled him out of the way but felt the kiss of the scythe on his arm. Teammate scrambled back as the man's laughter began anew. He ran his finger on his scythe and tasted the blood from Shino's cut. Then his appearance changed and Naruto felt the sudden feeling that he was about to see a strategy he could not have anticipated. Shino wasn't at all hurt, but the man was scrawling something on the ground with his foot. That was far more blood, and it only could be blood from the smell of the liquid, than he had taken from Shino. This was a fascinating jutsu. He shot the man several more times before the symbol was complete, and the man simply laughed. The bolt stuck in his forehead vibrated ferociously as he did so. Oh, your friend is going to fucking pay for that. The symbol completed on the ground seemed to glow. The man then took hold of the bolt slightly embedded in his skull and pulled it out. Shino cried out in pain as his head burst open where the crossbow had been removed. Everything I do to myself happens to the Byakugan over there. Let's try one of these other bolts your friend supplied. He pulled one Naruto had put into the man's shoulder out, and there was another cry and spray of blood from the boy. Kiba leapt forward unbound and leapt towards the man on all fours, crying out in anger. Naruto realized that the situation was beyond his control or knowledge and that his team was in danger. He had to find an alternative, and he had to find it fast. No. He had to get Shino and the team to safety first as team leader. Kiba barged into the man, pushed him out of his symbol, and began to hit him. Nothing was happening to Shino, who was down to one knee, his visible face and jacket rapidly staining with blood. The man threw Kiba off him and started walking back to the circle. Kiba landed awkwardly and struggled to rise a little. Naruto knew his choices were extremely limited. He opened the channel to the whole team. Fall back to somewhere where you can to Shino. I'll fight this guy. Hinata's voice cut through the radio link. No. You need our help to fight him, you can't. It's an order. Kiba is hurt, Shino is badly hurt, and at the mercy of our opponent. Draw back. He could see the concern on her face as he walked forward out of his cover towards the man. Hi. Don't die, Naruto-kun. The suffix was different, but now was not the time for noticing that. He had a bigger problem. The man had just stepped into the circle again and pulled out the third bolt, ripping a hole in Shino's knee. Even though the man was hurt, he wasn't in any visible pain or looked like he was dying. That was extremely. He didn't even know what word. How do you kill him? Decapitation should stop him from moving at least. How is Naruto going to achieve that? Hinata and Kiba were dragging Shino away and the man swore violently. You short arsehole with the crossbow. You the fucking leader? Yes. The man brought up the scythe as his body changed back to normal as Shino got further away from him. I'm going to fucking enjoy fucking you up, motherfucker. The Tanto wasn't going to work here, that was clear. Disabling or stunning wouldn't work either. It was time for a new test. The lead-weighted chain of the Kusarigama spun around him as he had been trained in the short time he had had with Kakashi. He lashed out with the chain and the man swayed backwards, keeping out of reach. Oh. I'm scared shitless. Which is how much brain you must have to try and stop me. The tone of voice didn't sound like he was telling the truth. More important was getting out of the way of the scythe that whistled through the air. He leapt to a tree and started climbing, the manically laughing man close on his heels. He dropped explosive tags that the man simply leapt around. There was only so much tree to climb before he'd have to jump. Jumping was far too predictable. He turned and lashed out, holding the lead-weighted end and sending the sickle of his own lashing downwards at the man who didn't react in time and suffered a short cut of his own. The man didn't slow at all and rose up at him like an oncoming storm. Rising upwards, the man collided with him as Naruto ducked the huge side swing. Freed from contact with the tree, the upward momentum would only last so long. Naruto lashed out with a leg and sent the man downwards, before grabbing a branch as he fell. The man stuck the side points into the tree and then leapt back up it. By then Naruto was leaping to the next tree. The man's chakra system was normal, his body was normal. There was no evidence of any additional jutsu around him. What exactly was causing his immortality? Did it matter? He had to decapitate or stop the man from moving. He wondered how he could achieve such a feat. The man was on him again, and his juggling of variables suddenly became very difficult again. Come back here, you fucking coward, and die. Don't reply, keep running. He fired a snapshot off from his bow before falling as fast as he could. He felt the genjutsu snap brief moments later. But he had some moments. To someone thinking as fast as he was, that was like giving him half an hour. His options were limited. Besting the man in combat was unlikely. Using a clone could work briefly. He could stall and hope one of the other fights ended, but he was a team leader, and that was an irresponsible tactic. There was one surefire way to avoid death, and one not so surefire. He landed in the clearing and fired another genjutsu bolt at the man, who started laughing as he ran a finger along the scythe. Naruto fired a tag bolt at the man and detonated it as quickly as possible, only getting a log. You think a shit genjutsu like that is going to get me blown up? Is that all you have? So if he couldn't beat the guy, then someone else would have to. Would Itachi come through for him, or not, was the burning question. He hated relying on the man. With luck, Hinata and Kiba could be recalled, but it risked Shino. Yet neither of the Team 8 members in fighting condition was capable of really helping him. He'd have to go to lower probability options. If you want to know where the Ninetales is, you have to let me live. The man paused briefly before shrugging. There's probably more people than you that know, and you denied Jashin his fair due. You fucking died today. Well, that was that then. The man was on him, and he wasn't going to be able to defend forever. He barely felt the scythe catch his arm over the manic laughter. The pain blossomed, but it wasn't anything he couldn't deal with. Then the man broke his arm very suddenly, and Naruto felt his body react to the shock. The man hadn't broken his sword arm, but he wouldn't fire the bow with any ease soon. He struggled to rise and draw his sword. His body didn't want to, too preoccupied with working out what had happened to the arm. The man tasted the blood and changed once again. He had to keep the man out of the circular symbol he was forming. He formed a pair of shadow clones to attack with him, but the man knocked his desperate assault away. He felt a rib break as he took a heavy blow to the chest. Goodbye, little motherfucker. He drew a spear and plunged it into his chest. Naruto expected to feel the wound form on himself. Nothing happened except for a slight burning in his side that he ignored. What the fuck? Why are you not dead? Naruto checked his arm. The wound and the blood were real, certainly, so the man hadn't hallucinated. The man stabbed himself several more times. It was a bizarre spectacle. Lord Jashin, have I displeased you? Naruto had no idea why he was immune, but the man was invoking a religious entity, and so was wasting his time. He began to draw his Tanto blade. The man's preoccupation was heavy. He started at the sky with his arms spread wide. Why do your powers not affect him, Lord Jashin? Naruto rose like a torpedo and slashed with the blade, the finely crafted steel meeting the flesh and biting deep, nearly severing the neck. Naruto landed behind the man with the blade having been ripped out of his hand as it stuck in the man's neck. The damage had been done. The man's head flopped backwards so the man was facing him. Arterial blood fountained out of the exposed neck. The fuck? He turned and finished the cut with the sickle of the Kuzurigama. The body collapsed, twitching a little as the man's head tumbled free. You fucking cunt! That really hurt. The head was still talking and Naruto checked to see if the body was still moving. Fortunately removed, the body remained lifeless. You wait till fucking Kakuzu gets here. I'm gonna drain you dry for Lord Jashin. Shut up. You shut up, you shit-faced shortars. The reminder of Kakuzu made him realize another fight was still going on. 2 fights. Then a body crashed down into the clearing. Anko was unconscious and badly battered as Itachi landed after her with no sign of harm on him. Naruto raised a bow and Itachi raised an eyebrow. Itachi, kill this fucker and get Kakuzu for me. The black flames engulfed the man's head. His screaming was quickly silenced, and the flames disappeared. I burned out his vocal cords. I have always desired to do so. Now then, Itachi kicked the blackened head, whose mouth still moved in angry ways. The fact he could lip-read the man wasn't helping Naruto. Then there was a blade at his neck and Itachi had him pinned. He noticed the man was pressuring the broken arm deliberately. I won't kill you or your team, Anko is hurt enough that you shouldn't worry about me. Now you and BU team on the other hand. An explosion some 100 yards away caused a fair amount of the trees to cease their fragile existence. This is just for appearances, and because I want you to hurt for killing Sasuke. Regardless, I suggest you help your ANBU live against Kakuzu whilst I succeed in capturing the three tails. Good luck, Naruto. The man kicked him and made for the barrier. Naruto realized he had no choice in the matter and struggled upwards as Kiba and Hinata came running. What the hell happened? No time. Get Anko back with Shino and make sure they are okay. Now, they obeyed quickly, which made Naruto happier. The less they knew about his arm the better. He struggled onwards towards the site of the explosion. He ran as fast as he could, looking ahead with his Byakugan. The fact he hadn't had to use it so far made him happy. He found Hare sitting against a tree, not moving. He could tell the man was alive, but if he was in bad shape the rest of the team was in difficulties. He vaulted broken tress as heavy rain began to fall in thick, heavy drops. The air was stiff and hard to breathe as the rain began to hammer down. There was a blackened and now steaming clearing ahead where someone had been liberally using fire jutsu. He could see three figures up ahead, but one wasn't moving. It was Pig. The man was fallen under a tree, his arm at an odd angle. That left Talon. He caught sight of Talon engaged in furiously quick jutsu as the man tried to crush him with tentacles made of blackened strands. There were broken masks on the man's back as well. Naruto drew the crossbow off his back and felt the weight of his broken arm. He was severely limited by it. He propped the bow up and took aim through the pounding rain. Then saw Talon had been caught and was being dragged in towards the man who had turned his back to Naruto. He needed to shoot and shoot now. Unbidden, his mind conjured up images of Sasuke holding up Baka in the driving rain. It conjured up images of not firing and watching a friend die. Naruto felt a word escape his mouth at a whisper. Never again. Nevermore. He aimed as best he could and channeled as much chakra as he could into the bolt. He imagined the bolt as a whisper in a quiet ocean, as a drop in that ocean, of a still field. He imagined the air around it parting and getting out of its way. He imagined the drops flowing around it, and ignoring it. He pulled the trigger as the gray tentacles lifted Talon high, and the man began to laugh. The bolt made no sound as it flew, the air around it calming like an ocean. It did not deviate except for gravity. No rain touched its surface. It lost no speed, and struck quietly. The target had no concept it was there until it pierced his skin. The bolt slammed into the man's head and nearly went through into Talon's chest. The tentacles receded. Talon fell heavily onto his leg and Naruto heard the crack as he stumbled forwards. Talon raised a kunai from where he sat and cut the man's head off just for good measure. Heavy rain washed away any of the blood as the man fell backwards. Naruto reached him and extended his good arm. Everything felt heavy at this stage, and his body still wanted to know what had happened to his arm. Lion, what the hell has been going on? What happened to your arm? It's going to take some time to explain. He was about to when the purple barrier around the lake burst with a roar of air and the feeling of heavy, dark chakra. Talon tried to rise and stumbled before Naruto barely caught him, his broken arm flaring under the weight. The masked man looked up in the direction, his voice dry and defeated. Oh shit.